This boy was incredibly talented at soccer, but everything changed when he was transferred to Juventus in Italy inside his own team. He was despised, ignored, invisible. His confidence disappeared, and so did his will to play. He changed clubs, but nothing changed inside him until one piece of news changed everything. His friend is coming to Italy, and now he has to prove the lie he told that he was a soccer genius. Number 10. It's the special number in soccer, worn by geniuses throughout the sport's history. But this protagonist, he's no genius. He's not particularly fast. He isn't strong. His technique is average, and his mental game is weak. He is by no means a big-time player, yet, despite all his shortcomings, he has to survive on the pitch. He can't let down the people rooting for him, or rather, he needs to keep convincing them that he's a soccer genius. AC Firenze under-17 team. A few years back, the protagonist was at the club, lost in thought. He'd realized something recently. Lies are a lot like snowballs. They might start small, but you end up telling bigger ones just to cover them up. Before you know it, those tiny lies spiral into something completely out of your control. If he hadn't tried to impress Gil, none of this would have happened. The day before, the protagonist had his phone to his ear while playing video games. He was talking like he was basically a soccer prodigy. The person on the other end asked if he was adapting well. He said yes. He even claimed he scored 3 goals that day. The person was impressed, saying it sounded like he was the best player there now. In his head, the protagonist admitted the truth. He wasn't the best. His name is John Lee. He'd gone to play for the famous Gioventù in Italy, but he struggled to adapt and basically ended up running away to AC Firenze. Of course, he's a bench warmer here too. But fortunately, unlike Gioventù, nobody bothers him here. Actually, fortunately might not be the right word. Sure, nobody bothers him, but he's still not good enough. So maybe things aren't that different after all. Suddenly he realized the phone was still on. The person was calling his name repeatedly, asking if he was still there. He said he was. The noisy girl on the phone was Gil Kim. She'd been his childhood friend for 10 years. Honestly, she was his only friend. Back in Korea, she was like an older sister to him. She could be a bit dramatic sometimes, but they were close. He figured if they weren't, they wouldn't have kept in touch after he moved to Italy. He felt bad for lying to her, but he really didn't want her to think he was struggling. The protagonist was drinking a glass of water while chatting with her. Suddenly, she announced she was coming to Italy. He spit the water right out of his mouth. With a look of pure desperation, he choked out, "What? You're coming here? To Italy?" She confirmed it. She said she'd been accepted as an exchange student at a culinary school there. And as it happened, it was right there in Florence, which meant she would get the chance to see the soccer genius himself work his magic. She asked if it wasn't exciting and said she'd be there in 2 weeks. The protagonist dropped his phone on the floor. 2 weeks? Oh no, I'm in serious trouble. He just left the phone lying there. Still in shock, he thought. I'm a bench warmer. I haven't even played in the matches. Back at practice, another player ordered him to get ready for a minigame. He was on the second team. The head coach just pointed and said he could do whatever he wanted. The same instructions as always. Do whatever you want, nothing more. He figured they didn't want to waste time giving detailed instructions to a reserve player like him. That was his position on the team. Even if he somehow managed to get off the reserve squad and make the 20-man roster, only 11 of them actually get to play. The other 9 are basically reserves too, with only 4 or 5 getting into a match. That means if he wants Gil to see him playing in a real game, he has to become one of the 18 starting field players. The protagonist felt tired. He told himself he'd never been good enough. Not even good enough to consider trying for the starting lineup. But things were different now. He'd never had real motivation to try hard on this team before, but there was no way he was going to embarrass himself in front of Gil. If he wanted to catch the coach's attention in 2 weeks, the first thing he had to do was get off the reserve team. It looked like he'd have to start doing something good in this mini-game. He wondered, who knows, maybe if I actually try hard, it'll go better than usual. He's the second striker. If he wanted to grab attention as a shadow striker, he needed a plan. He gave a determined look. He needed to target the attacking points. The referee blew the whistle. The match began. The coach yelled from the sidelines not to be too rough with each other. Watching the game, the protagonist noted that the mini-game pitch was much smaller than an official field. That made the game develop at a faster pace. It also meant you always had to think ahead, even when you were far from the ball. The protagonist pushed forward and called for the pass. Receiving the ball, he thought, great pass. Only one defender behind me. First, I'll fake going left. He looked back. Then I'll move right. He managed to leave the defender completely confused, blowing past him without any effort. More defenders ahead, but so many defenders in front meant a lot of space to pass. The protagonist made a mental note of the open space. In moments like those, every defender has their eyes on the ball. That was when the protagonist became a ghost among the defenders. The defender who saw the protagonist go by cursed, realizing he'd let him slip through. He was so focused on the first striker that he forgot to set the offside trap. The man with the ball made the pass. The protagonist knew his role. He was the one who used blind spots to move like the center forward's shadow. That way, he could invade the enemy lines. He is the shadow striker. He caught the ball and unleashed a powerful shot, scoring the goal. Scoring a goal was one of his main objectives. He crouched down on the field, watching the ball nestle inside the net. The coach and the whole team were happy. Everyone was impressed with his play. He felt a bit nervous inside. It was luck. The defenders did exactly what I wanted them to do. But that goal definitely gave him a confidence boost. He wanted to see what else he could do if he really tried. The whistle blew again. The coach on the sideline yelled that it was over. End of the second half. The protagonist looked at the scoreboard. 6-4. He'd scored 2 goals and they were ahead. He was ready for the third and fourth quarters. Someone called his name. He looked over. Coach? The coach's name was Luca. He approached the coach. Yes? The coach said, take off your bib. The protagonist started taking off the vest, thinking to himself, what? Is he putting me on the other team? Why is he making me switch right now? He covered his mouth, worrying. I only scored those goals because I got lucky with the team chemistry. I don't know if I can do that on a new team. As the protagonist started walking away, the coach asked where he was going. Confused and looking awkward, he thought, to the other team? The coach said, I meant get off the field. The protagonist gave an embarrassed smile. Well, that was completely unexpected. He's taking me out of the game. The protagonist is on the reserve field. He notes that the day is full of surprises. Nothing is going as expected. He wonders how he suddenly ended up on the starting squad. He thought it was all over when Coach Luca yelled at him to leave the pitch. He puts a hand to his chest. It feels unreal. He's so nervous he feels like his heart is going to burst out of his ribcage. A coach calls out to the protagonist. He stands up quickly. A man approaches, telling him to take it easy, to relax. Watching him, the protagonist realizes it's the head coach. The coach gets close and apologizes for calling him up so abruptly. He points toward the field. He tells the protagonist he'll be playing as the second winger. He asks if that's okay with him. The protagonist says yes. In his head, he wonders if the coach is putting him in right now. The coach nods and tells him to go warm up. The protagonist heads off to warm up, still looking completely confused. Watching him go, the coach wonders why he's walking like that. He puts on a serious face and hopes the kid will be all right. Meanwhile, in an office, Coach Tony is present. Someone grabs his attention, mentioning that the protagonist seemed different in practice today. Tony asks what he means. It was Coach Luca asking the question. Luca admits he doesn't know what got into the boy, but he really gave it his all in that session. Maybe he's finally turning a corner. Coach Tony agrees that would certainly be good news, but he insists they shouldn't push too hard and just keep doing what they've been working on. He says he'll continue to just watch from a distance for now. 3 years ago, that prodigy had every Serie A club scrambling to sign him. In the end, Gil Vento signed him, but his contract was terminated after he struggled to adapt. As soon as Tony heard the news, he contacted the boy, but it seemed like he only added to the pressure whenever he tried to help him regain his confidence. On the really bad days, the boy couldn't even bring himself to play, but Tony signed him anyway. He has waited patiently for the day the kid would finally come around. He's been stagnant for 2 years now. But Tony never doubted his potential. He's a soccer genius. He just doesn't know it yet. The time has finally come for him to unlock that door and show the world his true football. Tony thinks about this with a confident look. 2 players are fighting for the ball. One of them is Gino, the second winger. The protagonist is warming up. In his head, he recalls the coach saying he's the second winger on the team, so he'll probably be subbing out Gino. He tells himself the coach can't be playing him because he trusts his skills. It's more likely because Gino is tired. That also means the current winger is having a rough time out there, but he wonders when the coach will actually put him in. The protagonist pushes hard in his warm-up. He thinks that coming in as a sub is enough, depending on when he gets to enter the game. He should be thinking about the game plan. He lowers his head, closes his eyes, and breathes. Inside his mind, he rubs his chin, visualizing a simulation of the field. He notes that the pressure on Gino is intense, even when he doesn't have the ball. When he does have it, he's double-teamed. Because of this, the forwards keep losing possession. He asks himself, if he were in that position, what would he do? From what he recalls, Gino shares his playing style. If he plays exactly like Gino, he'll obviously be attacked by 2 defenders as well. He'll have to try to use the entire field to his advantage. If he draws his marker out and moves toward the wings or deeper downfield, it will create cracks in the defense. But even Gino is struggling, and Gino is basically a better version of himself. He wonders how he'll pull it off. He doubts if he can actually do it. He has a memory from his youth. Someone told him he needed to try harder, told him make no mistakes, that if he wants to succeed, He has to do it no matter the cost. Back in the present, he's incredibly nervous and feels sick to his stomach. Coach Tony, watching the protagonist, notes that he still seems to be feeling a lot of pressure. He's heard that the boy suffers under the weight of his authoritarian mother. For someone like that, the only thing Tony can do as a coach is simply trust and wait. Let him play however he thinks is best. The coach suddenly walks over and squeezes the protagonist's shoulder. He tells him not to put too much pressure on himself. He says he's just trying to give Gino a rest. He looks seriously at the protagonist and tells him to just go out there and do what he thinks is best. In his head, the coach thinks this should ease some of the pressure on the boy's shoulders. It should help him open up bit by bit. The protagonist looks back with fearful eyes and just says, okay. The coach thinks to himself that it worked. He knew he was only using the boy to manage Gino's energy levels, but he thinks it relieved some of the pressure. With a knowing look on his face, the coach thinks it definitely had an effect on him. Hearing that he was just there to sub for Gino, the coach then signals to the field, calling Gino off. He's being subbed. Finally, the protagonist is going to play for the main team. He tells himself that Gil will be here next week. And it won't just be any game. It's a match with the starting lineup. The protagonist puts a hand to his head, telling himself he needs to focus on what he can do right now. He needs to seize this opportunity to play in a U17 league match. He can't embarrass himself in front of Gil. It's nothing but a series of frustrating passes. He can't let things go on like this after being subbed in. Keeping possession isn't easy. He came in with a game plan. He wonders if it will actually work. They are more ruthless than he expected. After all, there's no guarantee his marker will do what he expects. In the middle of the play, the defender talks trash to the protagonist. He says he thought the coach was sending in a surprise player to replace their genius. Turns out he's just a ball boy with no number. He says the protagonist's name. He repeats it. A girl on the sideline calls out to the protagonist. She asks if he's shagging balls, mockingly recalling he said he was a soccer genius. The protagonist shakes his head. That was just a hallucination born of fear. He tells himself he can't let anyone get to him. He needs to focus on executing his plan. The defender watches the protagonist's movement, wondering if he's giving up on the attack and dropping back toward the defense. From the sideline, the coach speaks up. He's abandoning the attacking zone and moving into the midfield. That move is creating a crack in the defense. On the field, the protagonist thinks to himself that he dragged a great defender out of position to create that opening. Now, someone needs to exploit it. A teammate next to the protagonist notices the movement and sees the opening. The players behind them advance. The protagonist looks back, smiles, and notes that they learn fast. The coach is elated. In his head, he thinks it's fantastic. The kid made a brilliant move, opening a breach in the defense. Now that someone is moving toward the space, another defender will have to cover. Then someone else can take that new space. As they continue to move, one after another, eventually a real opening will appear. Then, the protagonist receives the ball. The coach celebrates, saying that fortune truly favors the patient. His strategy took the entire field into account. That right there is true talent. It's unbelievable that these plays are coming from a player who's been stagnant for 2 years. He's like the lubricant that unjammed the deadlock. The trash-talking defender sees him moving and asks if he's running off again. The coach continues, noting his ability to read the game, to figure out movement, and what plays will win the match. If he takes a volley immediately after that pass, the protagonist has the ball at his feet. He sees the opening. He takes the shot. It's football intelligence on a completely different level. Tony admits he was wrong about the boy. If that talent awakens fully, it won't just be the future of the club that changes. The protagonist scores. Celebrating the goal, the coach declares that he's going to dominate the entire world with his football. At the airport, Gil is on her phone. Tapping away on the keyboard, she says she wants to see just how good he really is. She puts her phone away, hands on her hips, and says, "Wait right there, soccer genius." Gil is calling the protagonist, ordering him to wake up. He can't be sleeping right now. They need to plan their day together. The protagonist snaps his eyes open, startled. It's morning already. He puts a hand to his face. Geez, do you have to be so loud in your dreams too? He shoulders his training bag and says he's heading out. In his head, the protagonist thinks he slept like a rock, but he had some help. Maybe, just maybe, he'll be a starter in this week's game. At the youth team's training field, the protagonist has an awkward look on his face. He's watching Coach Luca with the starting players. He tells himself to forget the idea of being a starter. He didn't even make the squad. He lightly taps his face. He needs to get a grip. Was it realistic to expect to make the starting team after just one random minigame? There's one more chance before Gil arrives. If he tries hard enough, he wonders if he can make the roster for next week's game. Gino is the first choice for starter. He asks if he can do it. He says right. He was the third choice. I watched the game. Coach Luca looks back in astonishment, and tells Tony that he is looking great. The way he drives the ball into the final third is on the same level as his rivals for the position, Dino and Andrea. It seems leaving him out of this week's starting lineup ended up being to their advantage. Tony lowers his head. I told you so. They want to build his confidence slowly, without too much pressure. Luca smiles. You mean like what you're doing with that stray cat? He says that's well put, Luca. It's exactly like that. He smiles. The coach blows the whistle, ending the scrimmage and telling everyone to gather round. The protagonist has his hands on his knees. Exhausted. He's so anxious. That was the last practice before the game. He wonders if the coach doesn't have the roster yet. Gil will be here tomorrow. Coach Tony says good work in the mini-game. As for the starting lineup for this weekend's match, they will contact everyone individually. He tells them to hit the showers. The protagonist changes out of his gear. He gave it his all. His friend arrives tomorrow. Whether he plays this weekend or not depends entirely on Coach Tony. He is running through the streets now. He runs desperately, thinking, please, you have to pick me, coach. Friday arrived. The protagonist's phone is buzzing. Messages from Gil. He wakes up and grabs the phone. What a racket. Another flood of messages from her. She says to meet in an hour. Looking at the phone, he wonders why she needs a whole hour. He's standing in the dining room. Suddenly, he drops his phone and takes off running. He only has athletic clothes. He needs to buy normal clothes. Wait a minute. What's wrong with athletic clothes? It's not like it's a date or anything. He's just having lunch with a childhood friend. He shouldn't overthink it. The protagonist calls out to his dad. He grabs his bag and rushes for the door, yelling that he's leaving. He thinks his uniform is his best-looking outfit. His dad disagreed. Suddenly, the protagonist is wearing a button-down shirt. Much better, he says. At the front door, his dad waves goodbye, wishing him good luck. He says it's a good thing he set aside some decent clothes. The protagonist looks back. It's not like that. On the street, the protagonist rubs his chin. Good luck for what? He's leaning against a pole, waiting for her. He checks his phone. He arrived too early. Looks like he'll have to wait. In his head, he wonders, is she still the same tomboy from when they were kids? Then, the protagonist looks to the side. She was speaking. Sorry. She's late. Your big sister, Gil, has arrived. The protagonist is stunned by her appearance. He's embarrassed. He turns his face away, raises a hand, and says, yes, sure. Gil asks, what kind of greeting was that? It seems like he's not happy to see her. She waves her hand in front of him. Hey, where are you looking? The protagonist is thinking, looking very embarrassed. He says it's the smell of her hand cream. It's very good. Gil keeps trying to get his attention. He tells himself he needs to get back to the point. He stops, looks at her, and asks, why are you dressed like that? She looks back over her shoulder. Cute, right? The protagonist puts a hand on his hip. He says, not in a million years could he have imagined seeing her dressed like this. She says, hey, it's not every day you get a chance to be abroad. She grabs his face. Don't tell me our little Jean finally realized I grew up. Inside his head, the protagonist has a different reaction. What is wrong with her? He pushes her away slightly, turns his head, and says of course he did. He starts walking. Let's go eat something. Gil tilts her head to keep up with the protagonist as they walk. She wonders why he keeps avoiding eye contact. The protagonist walks with his hands clasped behind his neck. In his head, he thinks there's something about how much she seems to enjoy provoking him. She's still the same girl he knew. He takes a good look at her. Has she always been this pretty? They arrived at the restaurant. A waiter places plates of food on the table. Gil is impressed by how much food there is. She tells the protagonist these were good choices. He really grew up. The protagonist didn't like any of that. He just told them to eat quickly. Gil starts eating a piece of steak. This is so good. She keeps saying how incredible it is. The protagonist is looking away silently. He wonders when the coach will announce if he made the starting team. He's sitting on pins and needles. Gil, eating pasta, asks the protagonist how many goals he's going to score. They haven't seen each other in 3 years. Can he promise her a goal? The protagonist is stunned by the request. Cutting her steak, she looks at him. Didn't you say you were a soccer genius? In his head, the protagonist grumbles. She has no idea what he's going through right now. She stands up at the table and throws her arms open. She says she saw players posing like this on TV after scoring. Should she do one of those? The protagonist puts his hands up, turning his face away. What are you doing? Sit down. In his head, he thinks he doesn't even know if he'll get to play, let alone score and celebrate. Impatient now, she puts her hands on her hips. Well, are you going to promise me a goal or not? The protagonist says it's kind of hard to promise a goal. With an unimpressed look, she asks, is that a yes or a no? Whatever. It's not like a player can just score whenever they want, right? Even a genius has limits. In his head, the protagonist knows things aren't going well. He grits his teeth. He needs to come up with a quick excuse. His eyes widen. He realizes something. There's a message on his phone from Coach Tony. The protagonist is terrified. Coach Tony. The defense is slack, leaving the second winger wide open. It smacks against the goalpost. A teammate saw the beautiful attempt. So close, keep it up. The protagonist leans back against the bench. That's already 4 shots on goal. Will I even play today? He shakes his head. No, I can't think like that. Who knows what might happen? I need to be ready. Suddenly, Gino gets fouled. The coach is furious, yelling at the referee about the play. The protagonist thinks, this is it. His teammate asks if Gino is okay. He seems to feel the impact but signals that he's alright. The protagonist thinks, that's definitely the way in. I might actually end up playing. Gil has her head down and sighs. She's standing still amidst the crowd, wondering if this is supposed to be fun. The game is tied 0-0, but everyone is still cheering. Then she thinks about the protagonist. She remembers he said the other team was really weak, so he might not play. She gives a small smile and thinks, he's really not going to play. Then Gino scores a goal for the team. Gil sees it and says, wait, Jean's team scored a goal. In her head, she thinks, no, if they already scored against the weaker team, their star player, Jean, will never play. The two are in the same situation, just with different reactions. Meanwhile, the protagonist on the sidelines says in his head, a goal right at the start. Things couldn't be better. The most likely way for me to get in is if the team builds an early lead. He clenches his fist. Perfect. Thanks, team. Then another goal was scored. His partner on the bench calls out to the protagonist, saying if he's going to cheer, he needs to cheer harder. He turns and says, oh, sorry. Coach Tony was watching the protagonist. The first half ended. It finished 3-0. In the locker room, all the players who were on the field are very happy, thinking it was a great job. The protagonist is just sitting there. Inside, he's happy. 3-0 in the first half, the team had a perfect performance. With things like this, Coach Tony started talking to the locker room. He said it was a great performance out there. Keep doing what you're doing. Everyone agreed. In his head, the protagonist said he can't help but get his hopes up. So he stands up, raises his hand, and calls the coach. He lifted his head, eyes closed, and speaks. Coach, don't you think you could put me in now? We can only lose a 3-point advantage, but more importantly, Gino is our star player. We should let him rest. He seems exhausted. The coach didn't understand that at all. He asks what's wrong with him. Are you feeling okay? The protagonist says no, asks if he can go to the bathroom. In his head, he says, I'm doing this. The coach remained silent, watching the protagonist, then tells him to go to the bathroom. The protagonist, looking downcast, closes the door and goes in. In his head, he says it's unbelievable. He actually went to the bathroom. He has his head down at the sink, looking into the mirror, speaking in desperation. That is shameful material. It's going to bother him for years, but right now he doesn't care. Then, they return to the field. Gil is in the background, screaming for the protagonist. He thinks to himself that he wants to play, no matter what happens. Maybe it's because he wished for it so hard. The second half begins. Dinho takes the kickoff, but it is about to become reality. 60 minutes in, second half. It's 3-0. The coach looks at his watch and starts calling the reserves. Among them was also the protagonist. He tells them to warm up. The protagonist wonders in his head if the coach just called his name. That could be his chance. The protagonist tosses his vest and says, yes, coach. He starts warming up next to the coach and says, it looks like your shoelaces are pretty tight. The coach stays silent with a blank look. He gives a little cough and tells the protagonist to warm up next to the others. The protagonist goes to warm up with his teammates. In his head, he says he's doing everything he can so the coach notices him. But things aren't looking too good for him. Andrea is Gino's successor, and he is about to move up to the professional team. I heard his team is performing really well in his training sessions. He is my complete opposite. Basically, I've been an unused spare part on the team, but on the other hand, I've basically been getting paid to do nothing for the last few months. It would be a waste if I didn't play at least once. 15 minutes later, it's the 75th minute, and the game is still 3-0. The protagonist is watching the coach talking to the substitution man. He gets apprehensive seeing the coach heading in his direction. Jean asks in his head, who will it be? Probably Andrea. Or maybe he'll put in Fabio, the defender, to seal the score. The tension is immense. Over in the stands, Gil and the fans say it looks like a substitution. They're probably taking Gino out of the game. One of the fans asks if they are going to put in Adrian. They say no, wait, it's number 20. Hearing that, Gil got very happy, thinking finally here he comes, the football talent. And there he is, the protagonist warming up to enter the field. The protagonist is somewhere else entirely. He's breathing slowly. In his head, he thinks, wait, what's going on? The coach starts shouting his name to get his attention. He asks if he's listening. The protagonist turns, looks at the coach, and says yes. The coach says, all right then. I'm subbing you in. The coach waits for him to give the signal before leaving him. It made an impression. Inside, the protagonist is scared and a little nervous. But this is what I always say. Somehow it makes me feel more relaxed in that moment, so he went up. That's why he made the promise. We have to score at least one goal for her, but if he doesn't score, they'll unmask him as a fraud. Gil is watching now. She's nervous, wanting the ball to reach the protagonist. She yells from the middle of the bleachers for the players to pass the ball to him, and they already had their chances. In her head, she feels her heart accelerate. It was hard. She wasn't very involved with the game before. Now that the protagonist entered, she got very nervous. Who is playing? A triangulation. The ball started running. It was right there. When he has the ball at his feet, in his head he says it's hard to notice when you're just watching. Being right there on the field is intense. The ball looks like a ticking time bomb and the opposing team looks like a pack of hungry predators. Out there, it doesn't take long for you to get overcome. Unless you're a genius, you need to maintain focus. It can be intense out there. But he's also hungry for victory. So, the protagonist makes a move. Everyone in the bleachers was impressed. Game on. The protagonist is running hard. The protagonist, observing, says, "Wait, but Dominique is going into the same area. We're stepping on each other's toes. Is that some kind of mistake?" The opposing defender speaks up, asking why both are dragging their markers to the same defensive zone. Do they think they can play relaxedly just because they're ahead? Then, one of the protagonist's teammates makes a pass. Then, the other player let the protagonist pass by, and he went ahead to grab that ball. Like that space left the two markers standing there, neither knowing what they were doing. Repeat, protagonist. He's going to perform a dribble. He is very confident. Upon managing to get past the markers, he advances to score the goal. From up in the bleachers, Gil says that he is very fast. A coordinated play to confuse his markers. The coach says that the opponents who kept creating space between their defensive line and the midfield were immediately overcome in the central area. With a serious look, he speaks. "Now show me. It's your time to shine." The protagonist, in his head, sees a huge opening between the two defenders. If he slows the pace a little and looks around, as if he were looking for someone to pass the ball to. The opposing defender says that the protagonist is looking for an opening to pass the ball. He's going to take a step back to be able to block the path. The opposing team's goalkeeper yells, asking what he's doing, since he's right in front of the penalty area. The coach gives a smile and says, "Too late." Like that, the protagonist is going to prepare himself to take a shot. Then he kicks it hard. So hard the ball looks like it even got dented. The protagonist's look was hopeful. Gino, even having played a good game, was impressed with that, and the coaches too. They say that if the goalkeeper blocked that, it would be something impressive. The goalkeeper even tried, but only grazed his fingers on it. The protagonist, in his head, says that the scenario had been in his head for 80 minutes. It just became reality. He managed it. He fulfilled his promise to Gil. He celebrates, and the other teammates also run to praise him. They said it was different. The shot was perfect. The protagonist, in his head, speaks that their congratulations seem a little exaggerated and asks what they mean by difference. Coach Lucas looks at Coach Tony and says, "Yes, finally, see what I told you?" He says, "Okay, calm down. The boys are watching." He looks at the group of reserves and says, "Oops, right." Coach Tony, in his head, looks at Luca and says it's understandable that he's excited. It was his idea to put Jean in there. He still thinks it was too soon, but he had never seen so much determination in Luca's eyes. He asks who else would understand Jean better than Luca. He calls Luca over, puts his hand on his shoulder and says it was good work. The protagonist returns to his side after the goal. He speaks, "Oops. Almost forgot." He remembered Gil telling him to look for her when he scored the goal. He asks himself now where she could be. In the bleachers, she gives a shout, saying that what he did was amazing. The protagonist looks and, in his head, says he didn't even need to look. He says he should give her some kind of signal. He waves his hand and looks at Gil. She got kind of no reaction. Stayed frozen. Maybe I should have done something different. I think it's one more mortifying moment that is going to haunt him for years. After the game, the two are walking down the street. Gil looks at the protagonist and says that she thinks he really wasn't lying. He doesn't understand and asks what she meant. She explains, gesturing, about him being a soccer genius. She thought that he was exaggerating just to impress her. He makes an awkward face and asks why he would lie about something like that. She puts her hand over her mouth, embarrassed, and agrees that he's right. In his head, the protagonist looks at her and wonders what's so funny. Anyway, Gil says that she thinks he will be one of the starting players in the next game. Upon hearing that, he got impressed. She asks if the next team must be very good. He said that maybe he wouldn't play that day because the opponent was very weak. The protagonist raises his head and asks himself if he really said that. In his head, he thinks, why did he need to say that? It was just maintain posture and he would play in the next game. His reaction was of astonishment. And he speaks, "Yeah, sure." He is sweating from nervousness. His situation became even more complicated. His next game is against Napoli, and they are definitely good. He heard it said that that team likes to advance the defensive line to press the opponent on the whole field. The team that the protagonist plays on is in third place in the group, but only the two best teams guarantee a direct spot in the tournament. Therefore, they need to win that match if they want to guarantee a spot. They also have to win that match if they want to compete with Juventus for the leadership. Meanwhile, he played a total of less than 10 minutes. He wonders if the coach will bench him for the next game, which is very important. Still walking down the street, Gil leans in a little and asks how many goals he's going to mark in the next match. He says he doesn't know and that it doesn't work like that. He looks ahead and, in his head, thinks that maybe he won't even leave the bench. Gil asks what happened. Her eyes begin to shine. She asks if she thinks that he can't do it. A silence remains between the two. He turns his head and says that of course he can and she's going to see. She gets happy, thinking that the confidence of a genius is like that. In his head, the protagonist is angry because he can't stop lying. He thought that he would be free of problems if he managed to pass by the game that he played. But things seem to get worse. Gil pats him on the head twice. She tells him she'll be waiting for his achievements in the match. He looks back and asks what she's waiting for. She puts her hand on his head and says, "Your victory pose, obviously." He lowered his head. Embarrassed to hear that, he says goodbye. She asks if he's angry. He says no. Hearing that, the protagonist thinks, why did I have to do that pose? Anyway, this week will be very important for him. Worrying won't change anything. Now he needs to concentrate on training from here on out. He needs to get onto the starting team this week, whatever the cost. Monday, recovery training after the game. The players are doing exercises. The protagonist thinks that doing recovery training after playing less than 15 minutes is a little embarrassing. Then, Gino shows up without his training gear. He says he needs to stop by there once before leaving. The protagonist says it's finally happening, that he'll do very well and congratulates him. He thinks it looks like Gino is leaving. Oh, he's going to the under-19 national team. Other friends hug him and say they'll see each other soon.
Gino says he'll probably be on the adult team by then. The protagonist looks down and wonders if he should say goodbye. He never even talked to him before. Then Gino approaches the protagonist, calling his name. He gets amazed. Gino says it's a shame they didn't get a chance to know each other better. He smiles and says it's thanks to him that he's progressing sooner. He puts his hand on the protagonist's shoulder and says they'll see each other again.
The protagonist gets confused after that and asks what happened. Gino puts a hand on his head and says he managed to level up earlier thanks to him. Anyway, that is good news. He just needs to worry about playing better, and Andre, if he wanted to be a starter in the next game. It seems luck is on his side. He was ready to dedicate himself fully to the training sessions that week. The coach tells everyone to gather up. The protagonist, watching Andre, feels his eyes shining with determination. It's going to be them, face to face now. Then, the protagonist takes a shot, and the ball goes very hard. Andre stood watching, and his teammate said that's a lot of power for a shot with the inside of the foot. In the room, Coach Lucas says he just said goodbye to Gino. Coach Tony thanks him. Lucas says it's a bittersweet feeling. He wasn't just talented, he was also a good kid. Tony asks what there is to worry about. He plays better than the kids 2 or 3 years older. With that talent, he should have moved up a division a long time ago. Agreeing, Lucas says he said it all. He grabs some paperwork and says it would have been nice to keep him longer, but things changed. Tony says it's time to focus on another player. Lucas asks if he means Gian. He says that's exactly it. Gino was a great player, but when it comes to raw potential, he doesn't come close to Gian. Sitting in his chair, Tony says Gian will grow to a higher level and develop experience. That's the best thing that will happen for both of them. Listening to that, Lucas says yes. He definitely saw a glimpse of Gian's potential in that last game, even playing few minutes, but he's also a little worried. Tony asks what about. He says this time they're going to play against Napoli, and he gets discouraged. Tony stays silent. Even so, he has to make him a starter. And of course there are risks involved, but it's also a perfect opportunity. At 17, Gian's talent goes beyond that category. If he plays at his best level and beats a top team like Napoli, he will never suffer from a lack of confidence again. Lucas was impressed. Tony continues saying it's time they started preparing. The protagonist didn't play any matches until last weekend, which means there isn't enough data on him. Lucas asks what he means by data. Tony asks if he forgot. It's right there. Gian's contract renewal. The scene changes to a man sitting in an office, watching the protagonist play in a video. He says he will be watching him closely. The one who spoke was Paolo Rossini, director of the youth team for the protagonist's team. The protagonist and Gil are at home holding pots and pans. Gil points out they can use one for boiling. Then she mentions another pan is for sautéing. The protagonist asks if she is ready. He turns to leave, saying he'll be in his room. Gil grabs his shoulder. Not so fast. She pulls him back. She tells him she is trying to do something nice for him. He can't just leave her alone in the kitchen. The protagonist gives her a scared look. He reminds her that she said she was there to practice. Then, A laugh comes from the background. The protagonist notices it. He looks back to see his father happily giving a thumbs up. He feels embarrassed. In his head, he wonders what that is supposed to mean. Then, the protagonist's father tries the pasta Gil made. He is impressed. He says it is incredible, and it's no wonder she was accepted into the exchange program. Gil gets happy and asks if he is serious. The protagonist's father tells her she should visit them more and cook more often. She says it would be a pleasure. The protagonist is just eating his pasta, listening to their conversation. Gil looks at him with a mischievous glance. She tells him that since she cooked for him, he owes her another goal. The protagonist feels blindsided by that comment. Feeling awkward, he asks who in the world talks about work while eating. The protagonist's father says he also wishes he could watch, and he apologizes. The protagonist is confused at first, but he quickly signals that it is okay. His father wouldn't be able to make it anyway. He had received a message from the team earlier. He will be starting in the next game. His father can never make it to his games because of work. He always feels bad about that. But his father quit his job in Korea just so he could play soccer here. He had never even seen him get angry until he started having trouble at Juventus. He always stood by his side no matter what happened. There is no way he would blame him for missing his games. Actually, the protagonist is the one who feels bad. He taps the table. In his head, he tells his dad to hang on just a little longer. He promises to make a lot of money and buy him a gift. Gil shouts at him not to keep her waiting. She asks how many goals he is going to score this time. 3 or maybe 4. The protagonist is stunned and tells her he is not telling. She feels awkward hearing that. She turns to the protagonist's father. She starts talking about the celebration the protagonist did when he scored a goal to dedicate to her. He gets very angry and asks her not to do that. Embarrassed, the protagonist tells his father that Gil talks too much. His father says that is exactly what he likes about her. The protagonist turns his head to the side with his hand on his chin. In his head, he thinks anyway. It is match day. He is ready. The group is focused and ready to start the game. Honestly, the protagonist does not know where this confidence is coming from. The players start shouting in their pre-game huddle. The match is Florence versus Napoli. The protagonist believes he can do this. The game begins. One of the players points and asks if he remembers what the coach said in practice. They are going to press right from the start. The protagonist watches the opposing team. He wonders what kind of pressure this is. It is even more intense than he expected. The kickoff has happened. The coaches are on the sidelines watching. Tony observes that this is risky. Someone asks what he means. The opposing team's pressure is stronger than expected. Their own team is concentrating on just keeping possession instead of building plays. If this continues, the protagonist team will have only one option to try. The problem is that the opponent has aerial superiority over their guys. Luca asks what they should do. They cannot build plays and long passes are too risky. Tony asks what else they can do. Someone has to get in there and receive the pass. Their pressure might seem perfect, but there is always a gap. There will be a position behind one of the opponents who pushes up too far. It will be a place where a pass can barely reach. Then, the protagonist manages to pass between 3 defenders. His teammate immediately sends the pass. Tony notes that it is a small space, but it is Gian. He controls the ball perfectly. With a serious look, the protagonist thinks to himself, the best defense against strong pressure is a fast transition to attack. There is no reason to keep the ball behind their own lines for too long. So, he is ready. The protagonist sends the pass out wide, switching the play. The teammate controls it perfectly. In his head, the protagonist knows he moved the ball to the side, but he cannot just stay standing there. He needs to plan his route while watching Bruno and his marker. He wonders what Bruno is going to do. Will it be a cross? Looking at Bruno's leg positioning, he thinks not. Knowing him, he is going to cut inside and shoot. So his own job is to act like he is making a run into the box. The markers react. His opponent warns that number 20 is headed for the area. Someone needs to stop him and mark him. The protagonist advances. It is a decoy move to attract a defender into the area. This draws one defender away so Bruno has a more open angle to see the goal. Bruno did a good job. Now he can see the angle. He cuts inside and takes a beautiful shot on goal. Advancing, the protagonist sees the ball. It is a curved shot with lots of rotation, but the ball did not go in. His teammate apologizes to Jean. Jean gives a thumbs up. In his head, he thinks that was so close. Then, someone in the midfield yells for everyone to get back to their positions. That is not easy, because the Napoli team has very strong pressure. While the protagonist's team is regrouping, the opponents start making passes. The protagonist thinks to himself, wait, something is wrong. His own team is good too, so why do they keep making errors? He admits the opponent is strong, but they shouldn't be having so many difficulties. Things are not supposed to be going like this. The protagonist is in attack, observing the intense pressure. A ball is crossed. An opposing player jumps, giving the defender no chance. He heads the ball powerfully into the goal. The goalkeeper didn't even have a chance to react. The protagonist realizes they got so worried about the pressure that they lost their positions. The protagonist's team has conceded a goal. He knows that now that they have scored the first goal, they will only increase the pressure. It will not be easy to turn the game around. But somehow, he can only think of one thing. They still have a total chance to win this match. Coach Luca celebrated wildly. He looks at the other coach. Did you see that? Tony asks how many yards he ran on his own. About 50 yards, he says. Coach Tony thinks it was unbelievable. After beating those defenders with that give and go, he tore through the rest of the defense like a lightning bolt. When the keeper blocked the near post, he fired it toward the far post. He ran half the length of the field and scored all by himself. It was a magnificent goal. Clenching his fist, he yells that it was a massive goal. He happily points out the look on the opposing coaches' faces. They have no idea what just happened. Luca admits he'd probably have the same look on his face. Honestly, he thought the kid would be way more nervous playing his first start, but he looks right at home. Coach Tony says of course he does. He's just doing what he's practiced. He left the entire opposing team stunned all by himself. Luca figures he finally realized it's not as hard as he thought. He says watching one of his players grow right in front of his eyes gives him goosebumps. This is why he loves coaching youth teams. In the locker room, chatter starts up. Two players are complaining that the passes are coming too late. They need to be faster. Watching them, the protagonist thinks their feedback style might sound like fighting at first, but it's pretty standard locker room talk. Someone slams a bottle on the floor and yells that he needs to get his head in the game. Anyway, he wonders what he was thinking out there. Why did he even try something like that? He got really lucky with that shot. If that ball hadn't gone in, he can't even imagine the outcome. Sitting with his head down, resting his chin, he thinks his training and strategy fit perfectly. He is a little worried about his stamina, though. But it was all luck. If he adds some real skill to the mix, Coach Lucas arrives and tells the team to listen up. He warns them to watch out for the counterattack during their build-up. Listening from the back, the protagonist just hopes the coach didn't see that. The coach continues. Remember, you have nothing to fear. Got it? The team heads back out onto the field. The protagonist stands there. He tells himself it's okay. He's sure luck played a part, but luck couldn't have been the only reason he scored. Still, there's no guarantee he can pull it off again in the second half. Someone taps his shoulder. He looks back to see Bruno, who tells him he was amazing in the first half. Bruno runs off to his position, shouting for him to keep it up in the second half so they can score another goal together. The protagonist hears him and says, "Yeah, let's do it." He remains silent, watching Bruno encourage everyone. He thinks to himself that this is really good. Then he looks up at the stands and spots Gil. He realizes it really is her sitting up there. He wonders why she's looking up like that. Wait, he forgot something. He remembers her asking if he would do his goal celebration pose. He had said sure if he scored. She had cheered and told him he better not forget. The protagonist's jaw drops silently. Oh no, his pose. He completely forgot. This is bad. He's never going to hear the end of this. Why does he keep doing this? Well, that's just him whenever Gil is involved. It's such a headache. Coach Tony comes up behind the protagonist and calls his name. He asks if everything is okay. The protagonist asks what he means. The coach says he looks exhausted. He tells him to let him know when he feels like he can't play anymore. The protagonist realizes he hadn't noticed until now, but he is out of breath. He wonders how long he's been like this. This is his first start in a long time. Maybe he overdid it. He's definitely winded, and his body feels heavy. He tells the coach he understands. The coach puts a hand on his shoulder. Just give me the signal, okay? He thinks it's the coach's job to know when to sub him out, but this means he really needs to focus. If he's going to get subbed, he has maybe 10 minutes left at most, so he has to set a new goal within those 10 minutes. The whistle blows to start the second half. The score is tied 1-1. He looks back and his marker is already there. The protagonist wonders what is wrong with their defensive line. The defender is right on top of him. Coach Tony notes that they've pushed their defensive line even further up the field. The other coach says they seem determined to score another goal no matter what. He analyzes the situation. He gets what their coach is thinking, but it's a mistake. He's leaving huge space behind the defense. Smiling, Tony says they are practically handing the protagonist another opportunity. The protagonist looks back and thinks they really need to think this through. They keep attacking down the left, which means the other side is wide open for movement. If one of his defenders can steal the ball, the best place to start a counterattack is down his left wing. One of the protagonist's teammates secures the ball. The protagonist starts running and tells him to send it. His teammate launches a long pass toward him. The ball is headed his way, but the marker behind him claims he's got number 20 covered and won't let him turn. Suddenly, the marker notices something. He sees the protagonist make a one-touch pass. Commentators note the instant pass from that angle. The pass went to the left, straight to Bruno again. It was perfect. The coach celebrates, realizing the protagonist noticed they kept attacking down the left side. He used the opposite side as his route for the counterattack. The opposing defender tells his team not to relax. They saw this counter strategy in the first half. He sees the protagonist running and yells for someone to pick him up. The protagonist's attacking trio is closing in. Number 11 has the ball. The defender notes that number 29 is heading toward the goal. Watching number 11, he figures he's a one-dimensional striker who always cuts inside to shoot. Suddenly, he makes the cut. As Bruno winds up for the shot, his opponent thinks that no matter how hard his teammates work, Bruno is just going to take the shot himself. Suddenly, he shifts his weight and changes the angle of his foot to make a simple pass. He completely confuses the defender, sending the ball straight to the protagonist, who was making his run. The protagonist thinks about how Bruno is so predictable they call him a scripted striker. So they planned a play to use that to their advantage. Everything went exactly to plan. But now he wonders if he got the angle right. He takes the shot. The ball is heading for the goal. The protagonist is anxious. Was the kick too high? No, it was perfect. The ball curled right into the top corner. The keeper and defender could only watch. The protagonist sees the ball in the net. He can't forget this moment, because he scored that goal. He takes off running. He searches for Gil in the stands. There she is. Looks like she's shouting something. His heart feels like it's going to explode from exhaustion. That's all he can do. He prepares his hand for the celebration. He puts his hand to his forehead. It's the same pose Gil mocked him for. He doesn't know why he did it. For some reason, he started looking forward to walking home after the game. The coaches shake hands. The opposing coach asks who that guy is. Tony asks, "What?" The blonde coach says, "Don't play dumb. Number 20. Who is he?" Tony says, "Oh." In his head, he realizes the opposing team wasn't involved in the program that discovered Gene 3 years ago. He replies that he's just subbing for Gino. The rival smiles and says, "Of course not. It's obvious you worked hard to develop him." "Where did he come from?" Tony says, "Giovento. That's where he came from." Hand over his mouth, the blonde guy says he never heard of them. Is he new? Tony says no. He was there for 3 years, but he wasn't very good back then. The rival starts smiling. Giovento, X or not, he's obviously a star player, even if he had bad days. Coach Tony is out of patience. No more questions today. He calls them friends. The two are facing the field. The blonde guy calls Tony a mean old man. Anyway, congrats. He asks if the player is Korean. With a lot of anger, Coach Tony confirms it and said he doesn't want any more questions. The blonde guy thinks for a bit. He said Korean players seem to be in high gear lately. Heard his team is keeping an eye on one too. Although not an academy player. Tony sees the coach standing there thinking and asks what he's doing. He makes an awkward face and says, nothing. Anyway, you better be prepared next time we play. He leaves waving goodbye, saying things will be very different. He turns again, puts his hand on his face and says, "Number 20 already signed a pro contract." Tony says, "I told you. Beat it." So he left, saying, "Okay." Tony watches the coach go and says he's not worried. Gene definitely deserved the title of genius in that game. Back in the locker room, everyone is happy they won. It was great. The protagonist's friend said he was great out on the field. He was a beast. He was very strong out there. And those 2 goals against Napoli were incredible. Not really. The protagonist put his hand on his head in shame. "See you next time." They couldn't believe it. "Already? You're the star today." The protagonist closes the door and says he has somewhere to go. Apologies. The player stood silent, listening to that. He says he's very busy. The protagonist leaves the locker room. He sighs. That's way more attention than he's used to getting. He thought about staying longer. After all, they beat a very good team. But he is completely exhausted and has zero energy to celebrate. His legs are shaking and he's holding onto the wall. But most importantly, someone is waiting for him. It was Gil waiting out front, asking what took him so long. The two are outside. She snaps at the protagonist that he must be tired, asks if he wants his big sister to carry his bag. The protagonist says whatever, or calls her bossy. She's irritated. "What? Bossy? You know I've always been taller than my friends at school." The protagonist is exhausted, head down, talking about ancient history. He takes the bag and hands it to her. "Let's go. I'm exhausted." She looks at the bag. "Oh, you don't have to. But for a guy who's beat, you seem to be in a good mood." The protagonist didn't understand. He looks at Gil and stays silent for a moment. He smiles and says, "Well, the coaches praised my performance today." She makes an awkward face and asks, "They praised you?" He takes a step back, puts his hand in front and says, "Of course. They always shower me with praise, but today they praised me even more than usual." She asks, "And?" Walking with his hand in his pocket, he says, "So, I suddenly realized no one ever praised me like that when I was in Korea. They were always busy criticizing him. He puts his hand on his head, closes his eyes, and says he thinks it was good to think about how different things are right now. Gil says, "Is that it? You can count on me to praise you plenty from now on." The protagonist thinks in his head that, actually, thinking back, there was one person who used to praise him in Korea. She would cheer for him no matter what he did. He thinks he finally understands why he kept lying to Gil. Gil always believed in him and wanted to understand his expectations. He lied to her because he was afraid of disappointing her, and he wants things to keep going that way. It's not just about not wanting to get caught lying, it's about turning her belief into his reality. He's made up his mind. With a smile on his face, the protagonist tells Gil they're going to get gelato, his treat. He's going to become a true soccer genius. Gil is happy and says, "Wow, Gene has become such a big boy." He says, "Yes, this big boy makes enough money to buy you a gelato." A voice calls the coach. It was the protagonist, kind of embarrassed, saying he wanted to ask something. Coach Tony points to Luca. Luca, watching that, sees the protagonist there and asks what's up. He gets close to Coach Tony and asks what that was all about. Says it was nothing serious. He says he wants to use the training field after practice for individual training. Luca doesn't understand. Asks if he really said that. He starts laughing and says that must be an exciting moment for him. Then says Luca would help the protagonist. Can't let a kid train alone on a field like that. Luca complains comically and says yes. Looks like he'll be working late. The protagonist is running. In his head, he says he hopes Coach Luca doesn't stay late just because of him. It doesn't matter. He discovered in that last game that he really needs to improve his stamina, and it's not just his stamina. His dribbling and shooting also need to improve. A lot. He already wasted too much time. He needs to push himself and catch up to the others. Heading to the coach's office, Coach Luca arrives to talk to Tony. He says Paolo said he's going to watch the next game. Tony says, "What? Didn't you send him the video?" He opens his arms and says, "I did." But Paolo said he won't believe it until he sees it with his own eyes. Tony scratches his head and calls him a stubborn old man. He better not be trying to reduce Gene's salary on the contract renewal. He tells Luca they're going to have to train Gene even harder for the next battle. Luca was shocked and said, "What? Okay, coach." The coach says the future of the team might depend on that. I looked back. Someone was shouting, "Congratulations." It was the guys congratulating Bruno. He'd finally signed a pro contract. Bruno rubbed the back of his neck, embarrassed as he thanked them. "Ah, friends." "What? Bruno?" So that's what all the noise was about. Bruno went pro. Another player sidled up to Bruno. "So, how much are you raking in? Come on, you can tell us." Bruno looked embarrassed, covering his mouth. "Well, you really want to know? It's about 10 times more. 2,000 euros a week." Everyone was floored hearing that. That meant his value just multiplied by 10. I dropped the ball. 10 times? So your salary bumps up 10 times if you sign a pro contract? I started counting on my fingers. My weekly pay is around 200,000 won. 10 times that would be 2 million won. That is huge. That's a massive difference. I wondered what I'd do first if I went pro. First, I'd pay rent, get groceries, and fix the washing machine. I could even buy a car for my dad and take Gil out to dinner. Anyway, Bruno suddenly seemed incredible to me. I went over to Bruno and congratulated him. Bruno grabbed my hand. "Thanks, Gene. You should come out to dinner with us this Friday. My treat." I told him I'd try to make it. "All right, boys. Let's get practice started," the coach yelled. I'm so jealous. Was it shameful to hope my contract renewal would go that well too? Well, considering I've basically been warming the bench for the last few months, yeah? That was probably asking too much. After group training ended, "Good, one more time," Coach Luca said. "Okay, coach." I sighed. With the ball at my feet, I headed toward him. He told me to try and get past him. I'd try. Upper body feint. Fancy footwork. As I tried the moves, Coach Luca gave me an intense look. That's not going to work on me. I stayed calm. Damn it. I got past him once using that upper body fake and a quick directional change, but he wouldn't fall for the same trick twice. Just trying to outrun him was useless. I needed to find a way to disrupt his rhythm. "All right then," I said. "Left," Luca called out. Suddenly I cut back to the right. As I blew past him, Coach Luca asked, "Did you already know I was going to do that?" Then a step over move. "Left again? Was the right a feint too?" Luca asked. I got past him. As I passed, Coach Luca looked back. "Ah, very good. You absolutely nailed that." I scratched my head. He was just being nice. I knew he was going easy on me. He said I had the right rhythm and asked if I wanted to go again. "Sure." I was so grateful the coach was staying late just to help me. He claimed he was only sticking around to make sure I didn't overdo it and get injured, but he was playing defense. even goalie. It was like having my own personal trainer. And on top of that, he designed a special program. Luca clasped his hands firmly. Are you ready for some extremely intense training? I opened my mouth to answer. As ready as I'll ever be, coach. He'd created a resistance training regimen just for me. At first, I just felt exhausted, not grateful. But then I realized how committed he was, and it really helped me focus. I was so thankful I wanted to repay him somehow, but the training was so intense, I lost the ability to even think about that. The coach was drinking something and offered one to me. He said the drink was perfect. I stayed silent, just watching him. It's tough, isn't it? He asked. What? I said. It's hard, but nothing is more rewarding afterward than resistance training. And it's not just rewarding. It's encouraging to know I'll be stronger tomorrow. If I do this tens, hundreds of times, I'm sure eventually I'll become a soccer genius. Well, at least in everyone's eyes except one person's. I caught the coach's eye. Thanks again. I'm going to train with you like this every day. He said, hey, I'm just doing my job. It just makes it easier for me when you guys are truly committed. I turned my head in embarrassment. I promise I'll repay you someday. Repay me? The coach started laughing. You'll do that? I felt uncomfortable with his reaction. Dude, this is seriously embarrassing. How about you start by doing well in this week's game? He suggested. What? This week's game? I asked. Yeah. He wasn't trying to pressure me. He just meant I should get what I'd worked so hard for. He'd been in my shoes. He learned there are no coincidences on the field. Even when someone scores a goal by deflecting the ball off a defender, you think that's a coincidence? No way. A player takes hundreds of shots during practice just to nail that single shot in a game. Nothing happens by accident. What he was trying to say was that I needed to have more faith in myself. It was only a matter of time before others recognized my true value. I felt happy. Yes, coach. Loud and clear, have more faith in myself. I etched those words into my heart, and I worked incredibly hard to prepare for the game. It was match day, Firenze versus Empoli. I was in the locker room. Someone called my attention. The coach asked if I was listening, and if I understood what he'd said. I told him yes. Listen up, everyone. You are all going to follow Gene's tempo today. You only attack when Gene initiates the play. Coach, didn't you just say you weren't trying to put too much pressure on me? The coach spoke louder. Gene has total and absolute control over the team. I opened my mouth in shock. This is escalating way too fast. Montebello Youth Soccer Stadium. Someone is discussing strategy, tapping away on a tablet, noticing glaring gaps in the squad. Resources are being hemorrhaged everywhere. An older fan comments to Paulinho that the U17 roster looks particularly bloated this year. Still glued to his tablet, Paulinho replies that resources are limited regardless. It's a tight spot. The fan persists, arguing that overhauling so many players at once will be prohibitively expensive. Paulinho knows exactly what he wants. He can't believe he has to deal with this right now. He's busy enough as it is. Jean Lee is 16 years old. The fan leans in closer to Paulinho, pointing down at the pitch. That must be him. Number 20 is the one imported from Giovetta. Paulinho scoffs, saying the kid isn't worth the paycheck. Staring straight ahead, he asks if the kid thinks their team is running a charity. They brought him over from Giovetta, but he hasn't played a single match. Furthermore, he hasn't shown any improvement over the last few months. The fan counters, mentioning rumors that he's performed very well recently. Paulinho dismisses it as just 2 games, nothing more. Internally, however, he has to admit those 2 goals against the rival team they reviewed on video were impressive. The fan argues that if the kid is as valuable as head coach Tony claims, there's no reason to delay renewing his contract. Waiting too long could allow other teams to swoop in and poach him. Paulinho rubs his temples, stating that's exactly why he came to evaluate him personally. Privately, he trusts Coach Tony's judgment regardless. Widening his eyes, he decides it's time to see what's so special about this Gene Lincoln. Down on the field, the protagonist thinks, man, I'm feeling a little pressured. He tries to shake it off, acknowledging the immense weight on his shoulders. Sure, the opposing team might not be top tier, and everyone knows he performed well last game, but this is still a ton of responsibility for one person. The pressure can be overwhelming, but he agreed to take this on. He learned from training with Coach Lucas that there is an indescribable joy in surpassing one's own limits. That's why he's going to follow that advice and have faith in himself during this match. The protagonist adopts a serious demeanor, declaring that today he will be the leader. He takes off, running ahead of the pack. Behind him, his teammates shout to follow Jean and push forward. As he advances, the protagonist reviews the basic strategy: cautious offense and bold defensive pressure. They need to maintain possession as much as possible and starve the opponent of attacking opportunities. Furthermore, his ultimate goal is a perfect victory. Suddenly, an opposing player attempts a pass right where the protagonist is looking. Watching the ball trajectory, He realizes it's a reckless long pass that won't reach its intended target. A player on his team easily intercepts it. They watch the opposition's reaction as they move the ball around. He notices that even their main striker has dropped back into his own half to reinforce the defensive line. In other words, they aren't going to press. They are in full bunker mode with zero intention of advancing. The protagonist traps the ball, thinking there are two ways to handle a team playing purely defensively. He passes to a teammate. One option is to break down the flank to draw defenders in, then suddenly switch the point of attack to the other side. The other option is to smash through their defense head-on. He doesn't even need to think about which approach to take. If he executes the second approach effectively, the first one becomes even easier later. It's obvious. The opposing team is already wondering about all the passing. That's all they've been doing so far, and they wonder how long it will last. The protagonist keeps circulating the ball, biding time until they drop their guard, and then he makes his move. He turns and drives straight up the middle, surprising his markers. He feels every pair of eyes in the stadium locked onto him. The opposing defender realizes it's not a pass. He's driving with the ball. He shouts for his teammates to work together and stop the run. The protagonist charges toward 3 defenders, telling himself to ignore the pack and focus solely on the guy directly in front of him. If he can beat just one man, everything opens up for his team. He throws an upper body feint. The defender bites, admitting he thought the protagonist was going right. The protagonist maneuvers the ball, thinking that sometimes the simplest method is the most effective, so he cuts back to the right again. He's past him. Now every time they try to plug the gap he just created, they only open up more passing lanes. Next up is a one-on-one battle with the fullback. With a determined look, the defender declares it's not over yet. The protagonist responds by taking a sudden step back, leaving the defender completely confused. Suddenly, another player tries a one-touch pass. The opposing defender attempts a sliding tackle to block it, but the ball escapes his foot, finding its way back to the protagonist. He thinks, back to my one-on-one. The protagonist fakes a forward drive, then immediately cuts sideways with a step-over, breezing past number 3. He thinks that this guy will never be as good a defender as Coach Luca was. It's perfect. He's right in front of the goal now. He briefly wonders if he should shoot or cross, then decides against it. He has to take the shot himself. He unleashes a powerful kick. The ball hits the back of the net. It's a goal. The entire bench erupts in celebration. Coach Tony lowers his head, hiding a small smile. It's 1-0 for the protagonist's team. Glancing up at the stands, Coach Tony thinks that he doesn't know exactly where Paulinho is sitting, but he hopes the stubborn old man is enjoying the show. Up in the stands, Paulinho stands up, thoroughly impressed. The goalkeeper, already rattled, screamed at his players to stop the protagonist, to block the passing lane, and deny him the ball. Suddenly, the ball found the protagonist anyway. The keeper yelled to stop him immediately, thinking there was no way he would shoot from that distance. Just as suddenly, the protagonist launched a powerful strike toward the goal. The shot had laser precision. The goalkeeper didn't even react before the ball was in the net behind him. The protagonist had scored again. The keeper looked back in disbelief, wondering how anyone could stop a shot from that range and where this talent had suddenly come from. Watching from the stands, Paulinho notes that it's only 30 minutes into the match, and the score is already 3-0. He knows that number 20, the protagonist, is at the center of it all. A nearby fan comments that the first goal came from an individual counterattack, and the second was thanks to his brilliant assist. Now he's ripped a mid-range shot for the third goal, proving his incredible versatility. He sighs and grabs his phone to discuss negotiations, questioning the current performance of his other players. Paulinho looks down at his tablet, analyzing data, and indignantly demands to know why they are paying such high salaries to everyone else. He calls Roberto and orders him to bring the car around immediately. Raising his voice, he declares that he needs more resources. In his mind, he admits the coach was right. That player is the best cost-benefit investment they will ever make. He arrived at the square, stepped off the bus, and said thanks. As he was leaving, a friend appeared and told him to wait, handing him a sports drink. The friend said it might seem like a little thing, but he did a great job out there, calling him our striker. The friend caught his ride and left. He looked back, staying quiet for a moment, staring at the bottle and reflecting on being called a striker. He used to think his previous team was the ideal setup. On the other hand, he never felt a real attachment to that squad. It was just a job in the city. But right then, he felt a deep connection to this new place, one that had been growing since he arrived. Maybe that's why, walking through the square, he suddenly felt so comfortable. He'd only played one away game, but it really felt like he had come back home. He started running down the street toward his house. When he got there, he grabbed the knob and called out to his dad that he was home. Opening the door, he realized his dad wasn't back from work yet. He went to his room and lay down, thinking it had been a great game. He played 70 minutes, scored 2 goals, and had 1 assist. Rolling over in bed, he thought that wasn't bad at all. Thanks to his endurance training, he managed to play longer and contribute significantly to the attack. It felt even more rewarding because his goals happened in tactical scenarios the coach had planned out. He wondered if that was why the coach was so happy. He sat up slightly and put his hand to his face. Thinking about it, he wasn't totally satisfied with his overall performance. Sure, he made good plays, but he felt he lost control of the pacing at times. He was too focused just on the ball, and the game seemed to stall. It made sense, though. The coach put him in the lead and told everyone to follow his tempo. He still had a long way to go and should have been calmer and more responsible. Luckily, the opponents weren't that strong. If they played better, they could have turned the game around. He had to admit luck was on his side a few times. Still, that dribble past the defender, the assist, and the long-distance shot couldn't be chalked up to pure luck. Like the coach said, he has to believe that was skill. He'll feel more comfortable thinking that way, whatever the truth is. Anxiety wasn't the only thing on his mind right now. He wondered why his dad was so late. It would have been nice if he had seen that game. Suddenly his phone started ringing. He looked at the device, surprised by a call at that hour. Answering it, he faced something unexpected. It was the team's finance manager. Someone set a plate on the table and said his order was ready. It was Gil, looking happy, bringing a special risotto with cream of bacon. He watched her, thinking she already got the apron dirty that he bought to congratulate her on getting into the exchange program. But he figured that's what aprons are for anyway. Gil looked at him and asked what he thought. He thought to himself that he hadn't even tasted it yet. Out loud, he said it was okay. She questioned if it was just okay. He then said it was really good. She got happy and said she knew it. He observed. Of course it was good. His dad was also present. His dad started to say something, thinking it wasn't bad. Gil made a joke with his dad. He thought to himself that he usually says what Gil does is incredible. Gil smiled and said it wasn't bad at all, considering it was her first time making risotto. He imagined how good the future would be. He watched Gil, thinking his dad had invited her over for dinner, but when she realized his dad was going to cook, she volunteered to make the dinner herself. His dad took pride in his cooking and might not be happy about that. He said Gil's food was good. His dad said risotto isn't a very easy dish. Gil agreed, saying she learned by chance and that those simpler dishes depend a lot on who prepares them. His dad loves the shrimp risotto she makes. Gil approached his dad and said she knew he liked bacon more than shrimp. His dad denied it, saying he liked shrimp. The two started a little argument about bacon versus shrimp. He got in the middle, raised his hands, and asked for honesty. He wondered when those two would grow up. He said he preferred a sandwich and asked if that was okay. He hadn't forgotten the culinary disaster his dad caused last time. Gil understood and laughed at the sandwich preference. She stood next to him, joking that she didn't want to be on his dad's side. She mentioned that he scored 2 goals. She wasn't there, and questioned why he would lie about it, saying she saw it online. He asked what she meant by that. He explained that he got a call from the team and got scared, asking a bunch of questions. His dad stood up, put his hand on the table, and said he did very well in the match and has been working hard. They called to schedule a meeting about his contract. They want to offer him a professional deal. He was in shock. His dad had already contacted the agent, who would get back soon. His dad smiled, clapped him on the shoulder, and said, "Congratulations, son." He thought about how 2 days ago he was jealous of Bruno, and now he was going to become a pro too. He looked at Gil and said he wasn't lying. She said, "Whatever. I already saw it online." He felt embarrassed. Walking in the square, he called out to Gil and asked what exactly she saw online. She made an angry face and said it was the first thing that popped up when she searched about the team. He felt uncomfortable, thinking she might have looked at his general history. She crossed her arms and asked if signing a professional contract was really that good, because she had never seen him like this before. He said it was serious and huge. Walking along, she asked what changes. He said he'll debut as a professional player and get more money, although he wasn't sure how much. He hoped to get a raise, even if it wasn't as much as Bruno. Gil congratulated him. He realized it was all thanks to her. If she hadn't gone to Italy, he probably still would have been stagnating on the bench. He thanked her a lot for everything. She asked what was up with him today and started walking fast, telling him to keep up. He thought she didn't seem like herself and wondered if she was tired. She said goodbye. He called out to Gil, smiling, and said the risotto was actually really good and that he preferred her food over his dad's. She turned around, waved goodbye, and said she'd let it slide this time, but he better watch out. He realized she was upset because of the risotto. A few days later, he and his dad were in a room. Someone asked if they were ready and said contract negotiations are a game of nerves and that they wouldn't sign the deal unless they were completely in favor of it. Let him handle it. We need to secure his resources from back then. He is absolutely necessary. As I said, absolutely. It's a deal. You handle the other side. just to ensure you don't end up disadvantaged yourself. So make sure everything is preserved intact. The protagonist thought to himself that the man had the perfect voice for an agent. He might seem like someone few would want to deal with, but in reality, he was the agent who helped him move to Florence as a youngster 3 years ago. Judging by appearances alone, you might think he only handles complicated business. In truth, he is a hard-working and talented man. He handled his last 2 contracts without any issues. You can trust him, so he's already here. Anyway, they have a professional they can rely on, so just follow his lead and call him Knight. Paulini spoke to Roberto, asking him what he was repeating over and over. The contract was already signed. He said it was nothing. Mr. Rossini, I'm still not sure about that amount. Rossini asked if that meant he didn't trust his judgment. He asked if he thought he was starting to lose his touch after all these years. He put his hand to his head and said, "Of course not, sir. I am sure I just lack the experience to understand the depth of your thinking." Rossini put his hand to his head. "Maybe you should focus on what you do best. But to be honest, I understand very well why you would offer resources to a young man. He doesn't come from an elite, powerful family, nor is he particularly talented." No. He turns and explains to his assistant. For example, 4,000 euros a week for a 16-year-old kid is a lot of money. His assistant agrees. Then Paulinho asks a question. But what if they paid a non-roster first-team player 4,000 a week? Without thinking, the assistant confirms that would be a bargain. The director didn't like that comment. He got angry. He spins around and shouts, saying that's the whole point of his explanation. He asks if the assistant still doesn't get it. Backing away, his assistant raises his hands. He says, "So you're saying that before Gene's contract is renewed again, he'll be a full member of the first-team roster?" He asks what makes Paulinho so sure. With a serious look, Paulinho explains that once, when they were coaching the under-19s, he went to Spain for a training camp. Curious, the assistant wonders aloud if that wasn't the year Spain won the Euros. Paulinho says that's right. He was taking his players around Europe for practice matches at the time, and the other teams were definitely different. The Russian team was especially good. After all, they were the ones who perfected tiki-taka, that fluid passing technique that ended up dominating the game. But what really shocked him was a player from a different team, a small, skinny kid at Real San Sebastian. His own players were half a foot taller than the kid, and yet the boy seemed to be toying with them all by himself. Paulinho comments that the kid had almost been cut. He remembers asking if the boy had signed a pro contract yet. In his head, he recalls it was a 17-year-old Antoine Griezmann. He knew right then that the name would soon be known throughout the football world. Interested in the story, his assistant asks if he's saying he gets the same feeling from Jean. Paulinho says, "Look, that boy knows exactly what he needs to do to win a game." He asks his assistant if he knows what makes that kind of player different. It's because he has a specific talent that makes it hard for him to fail. Football IQ, a good physique, speed, and skill are great, but those talents also come with too many variables. A player could suddenly stop growing or have a serious regression. But intelligence, a footballer's IQ for understanding the sport, that's different. The future of young players is uncertain. The only talent that won't betray you is football IQ. Motivated, he clenches his fists with determination. He believes that is exactly what Jean has. The assistant just stood there silently, listening to it all. Paulinho notes that the assistant still isn't convinced. He asks his assistant if he believes him. The assistant asserts that he trusts him 100%. Hearing the answer, Paulinho asks if he just places blind faith in him like that. He questions if his assistant thinks he's some kind of god. His assistant makes an awkward face. In his head, he wonders what this guy actually wants. Paulinho puts his hand over his mouth. "Maybe not a god, but I have a really great feeling about this. Let's see in a year if I exaggerated with that contract." Elsewhere, in a restaurant, someone is thanking them for everything. It was a pleasure. It was the protagonist's father and the agent. The agent says that, to be completely honest, he didn't really do anything. The father argues that he came to them to help. Smiling happily, the agent states that, in any case, this means the team understands his value as a player, and he can say with certainty that they are a good team. The protagonist is also at the table. Inside his head, he's thinking about all their talk regarding values and daily rates. The moment the meeting actually started, the agent became very pleasant, but on the other hand, he had good reasons for it. Holding a paper, the agent says there seems to be a small discrepancy with the figure they had in mind. The protagonist's father, upon receiving the paper, was impressed. His eyes went wide. Handing the paper to the protagonist, the agent explains that this would be the weekly and annual salary if he signs the contract. The protagonist asserts in his head that when he saw the value written on the contract, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. He thought the weekly wages would be less than 4,000 euros. There in the contract, it was 4,095 a week. His current salary is 200 euros a week, so that would be a 20-fold increase. He knew he would get a raise if he signed the pro contract. but they were going to pay him what they normally paid 20 other players combined. The agent begins to speak. He explains that under a normal youth contract, other teams can pay a compensation fee to hire him, which isn't worth much, but a professional contract prevents that from happening. In other words, the team really wants to keep you, even if it means paying more. Listening to this, the protagonist knows in his head that they want to guarantee he stays on the team. Nothing would stop him from rejecting that contract and negotiating with another club. He understands what it means, but Bruno is an absolute starter and signed for only 10 times his previous amount. Why are they offering him 20 times more? Happy, the agent pats him on the shoulder. He is proud that this means they recognize his player's potential. In his head, the protagonist admits they brought him in from a team that was about to cut him, and they waited silently for him. Now they see potential in him that even he doesn't see himself. He tells the agent, it sounds good. So the negotiations ended very quickly, and now he's no longer a youth player. He has turned professional. After the negotiation, the protagonist's father gets up, worried, wanting to pay the agent. Waving his hand, the agent insists absolutely not. What kind of agent makes his clients pay for their meals? That's not how he does business. Interrupting the conversation, the protagonist says, he will pay. It's pocket change. In his head, he asserts that paying for a restaurant meal is no longer a problem for him because he is a god. Then he takes it back. No, cancel that. He's not a god. He is in a classroom with several people looking at him, nervous. With his head down, he asks for help. Please. A few hours ago. For some reason, going to school always makes him nervous. It's probably because he doesn't have any good memories of school. Honestly, all his school memories since moving to Italy have been tough. He's already shy enough without the language barrier. So, making friends was hard. There were even times he struggled with some unkind people, and he doesn't think it helped that his team didn't try very hard to help him adjust. Anyway, that's why he's never excited for school, but he needs to finish this school year to complete his compulsory education. Now that he's transferred to a school closer to home, he just has to hang on for one more year. Come to think of it, he kept all that a secret from Gil. He thinks it's something he wanted to hide, just as much as his true soccer skills. Facing the classroom door, he thinks everyone must already be inside. Nervous, he sighs, lowers his head, and just hopes not to draw attention. Then he remembers he makes 4,000 euros a week now. He isn't the Jean he used to be. He grips the doorknob tightly. He opens it with confidence, refusing to let anyone discourage him again. A few people look at him. One girl seems to recognize him. The protagonist didn't understand why she was staring. Suddenly, she points at him, saying he's John from Firenze. Everyone approaches him, asking if it's true, and welcoming him. They were excited. The protagonist thinks to himself. He wonders how he could forget this is Italy, a country that lives and breathes soccer. John is signing autographs on paper. A boy leaves, happy as can be. Watching this, he's impressed that it's actually happening. He's sitting in school, but there really isn't anything to do there on weekends. So the most popular thing to do is watch soccer games. But first-team matches are expensive, so the students go watch the youth games, which are more affordable, and those were the students who recognized him. But they aren't just asking for autographs. A girl he's never seen before asked to take a selfie with him, and then another girl commented that he was very nice and they could get to know each other better. She asks if he wants to give her his number and says she really wanted to learn Korean. He had a hard time refusing so many social requests. He tells her he doesn't have a phone. The girl didn't understand and asked if he was serious. Walking away, he thinks she was just trying to be friendly. But he doesn't want to risk complicating things. He hasn't even had time to see Gil lately. It seems school is going to be difficult for a different reason this year. Some time passed at school. The protagonist was sitting at his desk, exhausted. He gets up, grabs his bag, and says he spent all his breaks attending to his fans. Someone notices the protagonist got up. They ask where he's going. He says he needs to leave early for practice. The girl heard him and says that's cool. See you tomorrow. The protagonist thinks to himself, never. Not even in his wildest dreams did he imagine signing autographs on the first day of school, but he guesses he can't complain. Everyone was very kind and supportive. It was just this morning that he was worried he might have trouble again. Good thing he was wrong. Suddenly he remembers and says he completely forgot. Today was Gil's first day of school too. He grabs his phone and sees he has many messages from her. One message asked what the protagonist was doing and to answer her when he finished. Reading that, he thought about grabbing his phone because he had said he didn't have one. He replies to her saying he just finished. They can't use phones in class. He asks how her classmates are and if she made any friends. She answers immediately. She laughed and said so Jean made some friends. He's popular over there. Confused, he asks what kind of answer that is. He's telling the truth this time. A few days later, inside the locker room, the coach wants everyone's attention. Nothing is different. Everyone must do their jobs. just like always. He asks the protagonist if this is his first derby game. He says yes. Tony affirms that nothing has changed. He decides how the team plays, exactly like last time. He approaches him. With emotion, he asks him to stay calm and show what he's capable of. Everyone concentrates and starts shouting. Leaving the locker room, everyone is very focused. Their opponents, ACF. Bologna Lignano is a mid-level team, but that doesn't mean they are easy opponents. Bologna Lignano and Firenze are such old rivals that their games are called derbies. Del Penha is named after the mountains that divide them. Of course, he has no idea how intense derby games can be. He's only heard about them. All he can think about right now is doing his best and winning. The team trusted him. He can't let them down. In the stands, the protagonist team's fans are very excited, screaming with intense determination. The protagonist stepped out of the locker room and realizes it's very intense. He didn't expect it to be like this. He wonders if he'll be okay. Suddenly, he got very nervous. If he makes a mistake today, forget the idea of not disappointing anyone. He'll be labeled as someone who let everyone down. He looks to the side and tries to find Gil because she said she would be there. The only person who will stay by his side, even if he messes up, will be her. He spots Gil and doesn't understand. He wonders what that expression on her face is. Firenze versus Bologna. Everyone is super hyped for this match. Gil was right there in the middle of the crowd. Inside her head, she keeps wondering what's going on and why it's more packed than the other games. But more importantly, she looks to the side and sees those people from school who are fans of Jean, asking who they are. The blonde girl claims she got a selfie with him. The others got mad, asking why they weren't invited. Gil didn't like that. In her head, she notes they speak too fast to understand everything, but she definitely caught some keywords. Cariño means cute, and bello means handsome. Screaming means the same thing in any language, and to make matters worse, she heard Jean's name. She didn't like that one bit. She thinks Jean has been pretty busy at school. Suddenly, she closed her eyes and went silent. Everyone in the crowd is really excited, but she's just there, looking downcast. In her head, she figures there's no way around it. He's going to be popular in Italy if he's good at soccer. Jean has really grown up. He even has people in another country cheering for him. So she thinks she should be happy for him. She wonders why she's in a bad mood. The little blonde girl screams for Jean. Jean controlled the ball. People are yelling for him to show off a solo run. He is very focused. Suddenly, he pushes the ball to the side and dribbles past the opponent. He lets out a sigh. All right then, I managed to get past. There's a marker in front of him. The defender says it was nice work, but that's as far as he goes. Without waiting around, the protagonist makes a pass. The opposing player was left confused. It went to Bruno. He takes the ball with a back heel. Without waiting, he makes a first-time pass. And the ball is heading towards the protagonist. He controlled the ball. The opposing team is asking the fullback to mark him. The protagonist advances and thinks about his next move, so he's going to aim forward. A faster strike. He plays a high pass to Enzo. People say Enzo is going to head it. The opposing goalkeeper tells the marker to jump with him. Enzo jumped. He is too tall. The goalie watching says he won't be able to head it. Surprising everyone, he isn't heading it toward the goal. He's dropping the ball back to the protagonist. Quickly, the protagonist doesn't even settle the ball properly. He takes a super first-time shot, just like that, scoring an amazing goal. In the stands, the blonde girl screamed that the ball went in and that Jean is incredible. Gil watched it all unimpressed. Her head tells her they are really excited about it. After scoring the goal, the protagonist feels a weight lift off him. He sighs and thinks luck is on his side again. He wonders where Gil is. He manages to spot her. And thank goodness he can identify her among all those people. He says it's kind of embarrassing to do that, but he should still do it. So, he starts doing his goal celebration for Gil. He does it with a lot of shame, but she got very happy. The blonde girl stood up and asked if people saw that. It was totally for her. The others say, no, it was for her. Gil, quiet in her spot, says in her head, in your dreams, girl. She says this a little embarrassed. That girl needs to calm down. He wonders if she thinks that was for her. That salute was totally for Gil. The protagonist on the field is embarrassed. He asks what kind of expression that is. He swears sometimes he has no idea what she's thinking. In any case, it's good they scored a preventive goal early on. At the start, he was really worried about making a mistake, since he had never played in front of so many people before. But the pressure wasn't so bad once the game actually started. It's a good thing he kept training with Coach Luca. Instead of relaxing, later he was going to sign his professional contract. Thinking about it, he thinks he saw some people from school. They really came to cheer for him. He didn't think they would actually come all the way here. He sighs and thinks things have really changed for him. There really are people rooting for his success. It's very encouraging. The game restarted. He asserts that now it's just about maintaining the rhythm. He tries to pass the ball through the opponent's legs. Suddenly, the ball passes, but he was taken down. On the ground, He wonders if the marker did that on purpose. The game continues, and the ball went directly to the protagonist. He passes the ball first time and wants to feel the game. Quickly, that giant marker arrived behind the protagonist. He took a hard tackle. Gene is holding his leg. One of his team friends wonders what that was. It seemed like he hit Gene after he made the pass. The protagonist knew it wasn't just his imagination. That player only got a verbal warning. He didn't get a card. Gene realized he's doing that on purpose. Coach Luca said it has begun. Tony is serious and says that Gene's first goal lit the fire in this derby. Suddenly, the atmosphere changed on the field and the game is only going to get tighter. He asks what Gene is going to do now. That real derby is about to start. It's 1-0 for the home team. The game is intense, a real battle for possession. A Bologna player gets physical, knocking his opponent to the ground. The ref just blows his whistle to play on. He says it was nothing. On the sidelines, Luca is furious. He wonders where the ref is even looking. He yells to the coach that the official is letting them get away with murder. Tony seriously tells him there's no point in complaining. The other team figured out this referee's style. They decided to play rough for the rest of the match. The ref's personal style is just part of the game. You have to adapt quickly. The protagonist watches the match. In his head, he knows the atmosphere has completely changed since kickoff. The opposing team pushed up their defensive line to increase the pressure. They are playing aggressively, making it hard to advance up the field. But the main problem is that it's working. His teammates are scared of the pressure. They keep passing the ball backward for no reason. As a result, their goalie is touching the ball way too often. They are being pushed further and further back. The captain tells the team to stay calm. Don't let them be intimidated. Hearing that, the protagonist admits the captain is right. In moments like this, you have to stay calm and think. The best solution is to fight fire with fire and play tough, but he simply isn't big enough for that. They also can't let the other team keep manipulating them. He wonders what options are left. Then, he had a brilliant idea. The reason they are pressing so hard is fear. They are afraid of a sudden counterattack. Luckily, he thinks he can pull it off. He's going to do exactly what they fear most. The protagonist starts sprinting. He shoots through the half space toward the midfield line to receive the ball. A frightened teammate warns him there's a marker right on his back. Gene, out of patience, demands the ball anyway to make his play. His teammate passes the ball quickly. He can feel the defender right behind him. If he turns with the ball, the marker will hit him hard. With the ball at his feet, he knows there's a reason he came out to get it. He turns and faces his defender. When a guy comes at you full of emotion like that, getting past him is easy. He makes a quick cut and blows past the big defender. The next condition needed to maximize this opportunity is efficient, organic teamwork. Watching the forwards up front, the protagonist makes a pass and shouts Bruno's name. An opposing defender is impressed and asks how he ended up in the center. The protagonist explains that he passed the ball to Bruno, who took his spot. Now he is taking Bruno's place. He sprints down the left touchline. Running at full tilt, he becomes Bruno's target. It's a long pass across a wide area. Bruno manages a cross-field ball for the protagonist to chase down the flank. It's a race against the fullback to get to the ball first. He might not be as fast over long distances as he is in short bursts, but the guy next to him doesn't seem that fast either. He knows this because the defender isn't challenging his speed. The opponent is fighting for space with brute force instead. Suddenly, he realizes something. He's starting to lose the race. He wonders if he blew the play. In the stands, people are yelling for him not to give up. Keep running. Listening to them, the protagonist knows they are right. He needs to wake up. He can't give up and feel like a failure now. He manages to keep pace with the fullback. The opponent questions if the protagonist thought the previous clash wasn't hard enough. Highly motivated to stop him, the defender tries to use his body to block the path. The protagonist makes a quick footwork move. In this game, you need to use more than just muscles. The opponent flies right past him. He didn't even touch the protagonist. Softness conquers power. Jean catches up to the ball and silently thanks Bruno for the pass. Now, only one last obstacle remains. A precision pass. Right between the goalkeeper and the defender. Enzo is there in the box to receive it. He finishes first time and scores a beautiful goal. It's 2-0 for the home team. This is what all the training is for. He is pumped by that mutual exchange of energy between the fans and the players. He never wants to forget this feeling. The players go to celebrate the goal with the crowd. The stadium is vibrating. Someone in the stands is watching the protagonist. He remarks that it's interesting. A bit nervous, his subordinate thinks they should leave before anyone recognizes them. That person's name is Dusan, a starter for Firenze, wearing number 9. Someone is handing the protagonist his bank details and credit card. The man says it's too much money, and he doesn't feel right keeping control over it. The protagonist is impressed, assuring him it's fine, but the man wants him to be independent. He places the items firmly in the protagonist's hands. He insists it's his money now, and he needs to take care of it himself. Holding the items, Jean thinks to himself. Honestly, if he had failed during the Bo-Lugner match, he couldn't have accepted his father's suggestion. But he played really well, so it should be okay to do whatever he wants, just for one day. He remembers the coaches talking to him. Coach Luca and Tony said exactly that. Live a little. He wonders what he would like to do. The protagonist's father mentions he must be hungry and tells him to wait just a second while he checks the house for food. Excited, Jean invites his dad to eat out instead. He's in the mood for something delicious. Hearing that, the father looked a bit downcast, assuming it meant his cooking wasn't good. The protagonist felt awkward, quickly clarifying that wasn't what he meant at all. His food isn't bad. The father laughed, saying he was just joking. He noted that his son had finally grown up. Rubbing his chin, he suggested that if they were going out to dinner, they should invite Gil along. Later, walking through the city after eating, Gil mentions she is stuffed. The protagonist asks if the meal met her approval. She says yes, the taste was approved, but he ordered way more than necessary. Not liking the criticism, he retorts that he bought it with his own money. In his head, though, he knows she's right. He really did order too much stuff. Gil then says she noticed how popular he is. Girls were screaming every time he touched the ball. They were practically fainting over him. She was serious. They said the protagonist was cute and looked like a K-pop idol. She swears hearts were literally popping out of their eyes. She seems irritated with him now. She comments that he must be loving all the attention. She asks if that's why he did that wave, just to look cool. The protagonist, feeling a bit embarrassed, puts a hand behind his head. He says he wasn't trying to show off. He was only doing it for her. Gil is shocked. She turns her head away and mutters, whatever. Observing her, the protagonist tells her it's okay to smile when she's happy. He can already see her cheeks twitching. Blushing furiously, she turns her face away. Then she grabs the protagonist by the neck and starts lecturing him. She asks what he has to be so happy about, and if he thinks he owns the world. The protagonist admits she's actually pretty strong. Playfully, she feigns a move toward Jean, but he dodges it. Both of them are smiling broadly. He realizes something and asks if that's why she was upset before, because she mentioned those girls cheering for him. Not liking the question, she frowns and asks why that would make her upset. He states that it's no reason for her to be upset, but regardless, it's nice. She asks out loud what he means. He answers that it's good to have people cheering for him. Especially irritated and very jealous, she steps closer to the protagonist, demanding to know, especially what? She tells him to wipe that smile off his face and concentrate on soccer. Smiling, he raises his hands in surrender, telling her okay and asking her to calm down. He looks around, searching for his father. He spots him standing in front of a golf shop. Gil comments that the protagonist's father looks like a little kid standing outside a toy store. Watching him, the protagonist thinks to himself that his dad is just another regular guy like everyone else. Later at the restaurant, the father thanks his son, saying he really didn't have to do that. The protagonist apologizes for not being able to get him the full set yet. The father is incredibly happy, asking if he's kidding. Just that single club is already a dream come true. Gil, looking at the father, remarks on how happy he seems and how much little Jean has grown up. Very excited, she says she has to thank him too. First, he takes her to dinner, then buys her clothes and shoes, and now tiramisu. She asks if he isn't spending way too much money. Feeling a bit embarrassed, he ignores all her questions. He just says the cake here is really good and tells her to eat it all up. Just then, someone approaches their table and excuses himself. It was a little old gentleman asking if the protagonist could give him an autograph when he finished eating. The protagonist is confused, wondering to himself, my autograph? He tells the man he can sign right now. He asks if the old man really knows who he is. The man takes off his coat, declaring he's been a long-time Ferenzi fan. He mentions he sometimes watches the Youth Academy games too, and he really enjoyed the last match. He holds up a jersey. If the protagonist wouldn't mind, he'd like the autograph right there. Looking closely, the protagonist's eyes light up. He realizes it's a vintage kit completely covered in autographs. The old man spreads the jersey out on the table, explaining it's his most precious possession. He's had it since the 80s. He points them out. There is Carlo Antonioni's autograph, and right there is Gabriel Batistusta's, and Roberto Baggio's too. Listening, Jean thinks to himself that he's heard those names before. Judging by his father's reaction, they must be incredibly famous legends. The gentleman starts scratching his beard. He says collecting is a lifelong hobby of his, and this is his most prized shirt. He points to a spot on the jersey, asking if he can sign right there. Jean says yes, but asks if he is absolutely sure he wants him to sign such a valuable jersey. The old man is incredibly happy and has no doubts at all. He tells him to sign, insisting it will only increase the shirt's value. The protagonist says he isn't so sure about that. The old man explains his reasoning. A day may come when Jean's autograph is the very first one he shows people off that shirt. So, Jean adds his signature to the jersey. The little old man says goodbye, wishing everyone a good night. Gil, having watched the whole exchange, is delighted. She says the old man is very polite and a true gentleman. He's a complete romantic, too. Jean replayed the moment in his mind and had a thought. After signing his name among all those legends who once played for Firenze, he wonders about his own future. He asks himself if someday he might become a Firenze legend, too. Meanwhile, back at the training center, inside an office, Luca is telling Tony that playing against the team where Jean struggled to adapt won't be easy, and it's not like they can just ask the kid. Tony, looking serious, agrees that it certainly won't be an easy decision. They are debating whether or not to put Gian on the field for that weekend's match. The game is against his old club, Juventus. Back in the day, the protagonist had a rough time at this old club. The pressure made him constantly nervous. People just didn't treat him well. Back to reality. The protagonist is surprised, holding his phone as a notification pops up. It's Gil. She just got out of class. She asks if today's game is against his old team, the one he left because they didn't get along. She sends a selfie and tells him to promise to be brave, even if she isn't there. She mentions she's wearing the clothes and shoes he bought her. He tells her to give him a break. Annoyed, he wonders why she thought he'd react that way. He asserts that he's going to surpass everyone. He immediately regrets sending that message, but she's fast. She already replied, laughing. In the locker room, Coach Luca notices the protagonist glued to his phone. He walks over and asks what's wrong, checking if he's nervous. With great confidence and a serious voice, the protagonist addresses his coach. He declares that he really wants to do well in this match. Heading onto the field for warm-ups, he notes that his teammates' expressions are different. It's because they're second in the group, and Juventus is first. Sure, the standings aren't as important as the senior teams, but today's result could change his team's ranking. So this isn't just a special match for him personally. Adding to the tension, Firenze and Juventus are rivals. Even Coach Tony spoke with more emphasis when addressing them. Suddenly, the protagonist hears someone calling his name. It's the voice of an old teammate he had trouble with. The guy approaches and comments on his return. Watching that group, the protagonist thinks there's zero chance he'll ever forget the past. That teammate's name was Jerome. Jerome is sarcastic. He says they're unpredictable. He figured he'd see him in a match eventually. He thought he'd quit soccer already. He didn't think any team would take him, but he guesses Firenze was desperate for players. He tells him not to worry, since they all know each other. The protagonist is pissed, but knows he can't let that guy get to him. He'll settle this once the game starts. Sensing the tension, the captain kicks a ball that hits Jerome. He apologizes. He claims he was just trying to pass the ball to Jean. He walks over and says Jerome got hit because his reflexes must be slow. Jean would have easily controlled that ball. He asks if he's right. Jerome, irritated, asks what he just said. Ignoring him, the captain pulls the protagonist away. He apologizes to Jerome, saying the game is about to start. Jerome watches them leave and asks where they're going. Jean didn't even give him a chance to respond. Irritated, Jerome expresses his discontent. He says he'll stop his plays as soon as the game begins. A bit embarrassed, the protagonist thanks his captain. The captain says there's no need to thank him. If they challenge him, they're challenging the whole team. Bruno approaches and agrees. They are all one team. The captain just warns them to remember something. Show the opponent how hard it is to face Xian once the game starts. Show them how determined Team Firenze is now that he's part of the squad. Everyone gathers around the coach. He tells them to pay attention. They're using the 4-4-2 formation, just like they practiced. Not the 4-2-3-1. Both wingers will drop back and be more defensive. He wants Gian and Enzo to genuinely help on the first line of defense. The protagonist realizes what the coach wants. Since Juventus is the better team, the strategy is to focus on defense first, then look for a counterattack opportunity. That's definitely the right approach when the other team has possession. Firenze versus Juventus. Enzo takes the kickoff, passing to the protagonist. He controls the ball and immediately advances quickly. Watching the movement, Jerome wonders if the protagonist is trying to break through the front line all alone right at the start. On the sidelines, Luca comments that the strategy might be defense first, counterattack second, but ultimately, they need to score to win. Proudly, Tony confirms that's why he gave them tools to do exactly that, like a surprise attack at the start of the game. Hearing this, Luca questions the other team, who look confused. He asks if they really think Gian can solve everything alone. Speaking loudly, he declares that Gian isn't alone. He might have the ball, but the whole team is moving with him. The opposing marker is hesitant. He claims Gian has never been this sharp. He yells at his teammates to cut off the attack. The protagonist runs quickly, scanning the opposing field. He sizes up the lone defender. He'll just use his agility to perform a simple feint and get past this marker. Now he can see some of his teammates on the attack. Enzo has opened a path to the front, and Bruno stayed on the wing. So, if he passes with his right foot, it will look convincing. As he attempts a pass, one of the opponents tries to intercept, but it wasn't a pass attempt. He was just faking it. He blows past the marker. The protagonist excuses himself. He has other plans. Seeing the play, Luca celebrates, noting that he destabilized the midfield with just 2 moves. He is deeply focused on this play. He takes a breath and needs to make a quick analysis to decide his next move. Enzo slid into the box and then pulled back out. Bruno is causing confusion by moving to the center with a defender nearby. Meanwhile, Raphael is running toward open space on the right. In this situation, only one thing will be going through the last defender's mind, that the protagonist is going to pass to one of those 3, but he's not passing to anyone. Watching the protagonist's actions, Jerome is surprised. He says the distance is impossible and wonders if he's really going to shoot from there. Then, Jean takes a powerful shot right from where he is. The ball sails over the marker. It smashes right against the crossbar. The goalkeeper didn't even have time to react. He just stood there. Teammates say it was very close and a beautiful shot. Watching the play, Jerome wonders what that was, and if it's really the same Jean he knew. Returning to regroup, Enzo asks if Jerome is already worried. He hopes not, because the best player hasn't even warmed up yet. After that shot, the protagonist is very confident. He says that now the game is truly starting. After that play, the keeper passes to Jerome. The ball didn't go in, but the protagonist wonders if that early surprise attack rattled them. The other team is carefully building their attack from the back, starting with the goalie. Priority now is defense, then counterattack. Gilvento is just exchanging passes for now because of the tight defense, but they'll look for an opening. He wonders what their approach will be. He suspects he'll probably be their target, which means they'll have to use their wingbacks. Seeing the wingbacks advancing, the protagonist shouts for the formation to tighten up. The opposing defender realizes they're reading his moves like an open book. In the background, Coach Tony says Gian did a good job. He noticed the left winger moving up for a numerical advantage, so he shifted left, blocking them. And he didn't do it alone. He ordered his teammates to move too, completely frustrating the other team's plan. The coach added leading the first line of defense to his existing role, but he's handling it perfectly. They wonder what to do with Jean. Neither side has scored, but it's been an even match. They use space efficiently to stop the other team from advancing, and if they tried to get through, his team defended firmly. Whenever they stole the ball, they launched a counter. They strictly followed Coach Tony's instructions to confuse the opposition. It was already 20 minutes into the first half. Watching the match, Luca states that with such an intense deadlock, it's time for both teams to start losing focus. Tony agrees. He points out where they're passing the ball. It was only in the midfield. His boys are letting them do that, and the other team started thinking it was okay. They completely forgot how risky it is. The protagonist is very serious, thinking it's time to pick up the pace. One opponent passes the ball half-heartedly, asking how long they'll keep up this intense pressure. Jerome sees that and yells, asking what kind of slow pass that was. Noticing this, the protagonist says that's their chance. With the weak pass, he goes straight for the ball. Jerome realized Gian was just waiting for a mistake, but the whole team needs to work together to apply pressure. It makes no sense for him to move alone. The captain observed the movement and tells all his players to go. Suddenly, everyone was waiting for the right moment to move with the protagonist. That's when Jerome realized it, that Jean was the key player on that team. Jean's team is moving as one. He feels very confident. He shouts for everyone to push forward. All he has to do is intercept that pass. So quickly, he sticks his foot out to try and intercept, but the ball wasn't intercepted. He says it was very close, but it's not over yet. He's going to advance again to get that ball. The opponent passes the ball back. Watching this, the protagonist realizes that since they've been on the attack for so long, their backline positioning is going to be a complete mess. He runs with great confidence, ordering his team to push up too. The opponents start passing side to side, but the protagonist doesn't give up until the ball reaches Jerome. He realized his team ended up passing the ball all the way to the last line of defense. Watching this, the protagonist says his team worked that pressure perfectly. Most people would seize that opportunity to escape the pressure by clearing the ball somewhere far away, but not Jerome. Juventus is a top team, packed with elite players aiming to debut as pros in major clubs. Instead of clearing it, he'll try to build the play, passing or dribbling to escape the press. Jerome and Gian are face to face. The opposing goalie yells for his teammate to give the ball to whoever is making a run. Jerome says no way, and he makes a pass to his teammate. Seeing that, it was just as predicted. Jerome opted to pass the ball to escape the pressure. He didn't realize it due to the precision of the intel, but there's no need to worry because Bruno is right there to intercept the pass. Happy, he tells Bruno it was a beautiful interception. Behind the protagonist is Jerome, marking very tightly. His teammate releases the pass, The ball goes straight to the protagonist. Behind him, his opponent asks if the protagonist thinks he can receive that ball with his back to him. He tells him not to fool himself about the situation. Without even speaking, the protagonist flicks the ball up, managing to pass sideways. Suddenly, Jerome prepares for a slide tackle. He managed to take the protagonist down in the play. Coach Tony was very upset, yelling at the ref that it was a foul. The protagonist, after taking that tackle, remembers that he always marked him like that. He's used to it. The ref hasn't called a foul yet, but there's no need to stop. The ball isn't his yet. So Jean prepares to challenge Jerome for the ball too. He managed to get it and confirms the ball is still in play. Just one more step. Quickly, before Jerome arrives, he unleashes a super shot on goal. He shot and the ball went in. The keeper couldn't get it. He waited anxiously for the referee's decision. He decided it was a goal. The protagonist kneels and celebrates wildly. It was 25 minutes into the first half, and Jean scores. It's 1-0. With great anger, Jerome grinds his teeth. He comments on how much he's grown. Responding to that, he says he thinks so. He states he doesn't remember Jerome being so small. The pace of the game changed after he scored that first goal. You can understand how the other team must have felt. After all, they gave up a goal after controlling the ball for 20 minutes. But things heated up on the field. Free-flowing emotions meant more impulsive plays. Things got more complicated, and he needed to keep calm. Needed to focus more on the game, watching the movement of the match. Coach Luca says the other team is getting pretty emotional. Dead serious? Tony says that's to be expected. Number 5's pride was especially wounded. Jean really got the best of him. The game continued. Jean had the ball at his feet. Someone yells that there's a man behind him. Quickly, he releases the ball to one of his teammates. He can't let it show that he's scared. Actually, this is exactly the moment. He needs to show off for Gil, so he pretended he wasn't afraid at all. He became more active and tried to hold on to possession longer. Whenever they were about to gang up on him, his teammates joined in and marked them tightly. Very happy, he says, "Take that, Gilberto." Now he has reliable teammates. If they double-team him, they leave an opening on the other side. There's open space on the right side of the field. He's going to switch the play over there and run forward as fast as he can. He makes the pass and sprints. He was out of breath because it was almost the end of the first half. But he ran with determination. He'd never had so much fun during a game before. The second half began. Heading back onto the field, Coach Luca motivates the players, telling them to go out there and get this win. After saying that, he turns to Coach Tony and asks if they should call Coach Vincenzo. He insists they should call him right now and tell him to sign Jean, the different future, immediately. Trying to calm Luca's nerves, Tony tells him not to rush, since they're in the middle of a game. Very euphoric, Luca watches, clenches his fist, and tells the coach to look at him. He's overcoming the opposing team all by himself. Tony admits that he certainly has hot blood running through his veins. Still, he has to admit it. Jean seems to have cut loose since he scored that first goal. That's the face of a teenager who loves playing soccer, not an aspiring professional being crushed by the weight of others' expectations. Proudly, he tells Luca that he's a talented kid. He replies yes, and they're going to love him when he joins the main team. People are celebrating in the stands. Among them, there's a person watching who asks his assistant for information about number 20. His assistant asks if it's the guy from the other team. Impatient with questions, he wonders if he'd ask to investigate a player from his own team. This guy's name was Matthias, the new director of Juventus. Smiling, a little embarrassed, his assistant says that he might not know, because he hasn't been in Italy for very long. But number 20 used to be one of their players. He terminated his contract with Juventus at the beginning of that year. Then he signed with Firenze, and from what he understood, he had trouble adapting to the team. Worried, the new director asks him to explain in more detail. He already feels a headache coming on. He sighs and thinks that, from what his assistant said, it seems Juventus is in a much worse situation than he thought. They should be one of the best teams in Serie A, but they hardly have any players who came from their own youth system. They built a squad by spending a lot of money, only to lose the league title to FC Milan del Mondo, who spent only half that amount. He understands they asked a German to help because they had been struggling since the start of the season, but he never imagined they were managing things so poorly. He wonders how they let a player as talented as Jean slip away. They should have kept him. No matter what. Watching, he realizes that he outplayed their team all by himself. He's already far above the U17 level. He asks if the people running the youth team of the best club in Serie A are really that incompetent. At the beginning of that year, if he had arrived there a year ago, he would have changed that team's future. He stands up and states that he has to make some important changes. Let's start by replacing the leadership responsible for that mess. It was already 20 minutes into the second half. The protagonist admits in his head that he had never played a full match before, so his legs started shaking halfway through the second half. The coaches kept asking him if he wanted to rest, but he wanted to try to play until the end. He didn't want to leave a single drop of regret out there on the field. He got a boost of energy, seeing how frustrated the other team was. And when he almost reached his limit at the end, thinking of Gil, he managed to continue. He should have deleted that message as quickly as possible, but it was too late to turn back now. So he gave everything he had so he could face Gil without a bit of shame. And in the end, they beat the opposing team. His coaches watch with great happiness, and they hug the protagonist with much celebration because their team won the classic. After the game, everyone is heading home on the bus. The coach is on his phone while the other players are sleeping. He was composing a message. Finally, he hits send. He says he's going to thank him. The message was sent to Coach Vincenzo. He was the head coach of the Firenze main team. Over to Gil. She's on her phone, saying she's bored. She wonders just how tired Jean could be to not even have energy to text her back. She thought he would reply. She drops the phone on the bed, frustrated, complaining that she gets he was tired yesterday, but he should have texted back as soon as he got up this morning. She calms down, resting her head on the pillow. Practice should be over by now anyway. He really should pay more attention to his only friend. She gets off the bed, wondering if maybe she isn't his only friend anymore. She sits silently, cross-legged, then gets impatient again. She says whatever. She doesn't like this. And why is she worrying so much about it? It's just Jean. Curious, she wonders what he's doing right now. Suddenly, her phone vibrates. She shoots up, thinking it's him. She notices something. She reads the message and sees he's asking her to hang out. The next day, there was the stadium. Gil and the protagonist are on the street. She asks if that's the main Florence team's stadium. He answers that apparently people in Florence gather here every weekend. The stadium is called Artemio Franchi. Jealous, she asks why he's there with her instead of his Florentine friends from school. He looked confused with an awkward look and replies that he's not even close to them. They're kind of annoying. He didn't want to go alone. He puts his hand on her head and explains there was no one else to go with him but her. She feigned anger and says she guesses she has no choice. Suddenly she jumps on him very cheerfully. She mentions he can count on his big sister to spend time with him. Today he was feeling very lonely, but he'd better behave himself. After messing around, she asks if he doesn't have practice. He says he does, but explains that instead, the head coach gave him a special task. He doesn't say what it is, and Gil gets very curious, telling him to spill it. Yesterday, at the training center. In the coach's room were Tony and the protagonist. Tony wanted the protagonist to go watch a game. He was impressed and says, "A game?" He replied, "Yes, it's a game for the Firenze main team." Remembering his commitments, he tells the coach he has practice. The coach informs him he's off. He explains that he played his first full match yesterday, and it was intense. He orders him to take a break. It's an Italian Cup game, and he might even run into someone he knows. He didn't want to sit around just to watch a simple game at the stadium. His coach says it's an order and asks if he's arguing with him. Scared, he puts his hands up and says he would never argue. His coach starts laughing and tells him to relax. He's not taking a vacation. He has a task for him. He wants to hear the protagonist's opinions on the game, like what style his team plays or what they can improve, and what kind of role he would play if he were on that field. He handed him tickets. He notices there are 2 tickets. The coach explains it so he can take his girlfriend. He was shocked to hear that from his coach. Seeing the protagonist's expression, the coach apologizes, wondering if it's a secret, but he heard it from Luca, because he bought gifts for her with his first paycheck. Angrily, in his mind, the protagonist clenches his fist, calling Luca a traitor. Embarrassed, he explains to him that she's just a friend. Not wanting to get into it further, the coach slaps the protagonist on the shoulder, very cheerful, says he believes him, and tells him to have fun. Back to the protagonist in the present, remembering what the coach said, he wonders what he was thinking. Gil gets his attention, saying he zoned out completely. He replies, apologizing, and asks himself what he was talking about again. She says he was talking about having to wait 30 minutes in line before they can get in. She remembers he warned the game started at 5. She thinks they're going to miss the start. Maybe they should have met up earlier. The protagonist turns and asks if that's what she's worried about. Suddenly, Gil notices something. It was Jean holding her hand, telling her to follow. In his head, he thinks, actually, he asked to meet later on purpose, because he doesn't need to wait in line. Disbelieving, Gil asks why the guard let them in so easily. He explains it's because he's going to play there soon. He asks her a question. Has she ever seen a professional athlete stand in line to enter the stadium? Hearing that, she says he has a point, but he sounds like a jerk. In his head, he knows he sounds like a jerk, but it couldn't be helped. He practiced that line many times. He realizes it's the entrance to watch the game. Suddenly, he's impressed. It was a perfect atmosphere. The entire stadium was flooded by a purple sea, and purple waves rippled through the sea as chants echoed in the air. Gil looks at the protagonist, states that it's amazing, and asks if he's going to play there someday. He affirms that yes. Worried about him, she doubts if he'll be okay. He's confused. Then, jokingly, she says she means, does he think he'll be okay touching the ball in front of so many people? A bit desperate, he says of course he'll be okay. In his head, he admits that, to be honest, Gil is right. How is he going to play with so many people watching him? No, he needs to stop thinking about that. It's going to take years before he plays here. There's no need to worry about that now. He's just going to relax and concentrate on the task his coach gave him. That day, all he's doing is observing how Team Ferenzi plays. 43 minutes into the first half. It seems the team is getting booed. Gil comes over and asks what's up with the crowd. The protagonist is also a bit nervous. He's out of it, even sitting in the stands. The crowd was basically telling the players to give up. They said if they were just going to pass the ball around all day, they might as well go home. How could they win with such weak plays? Amidst it all sat Gil and the protagonist, just watching silently. Gil noted that the fans seemed really upset. He replied that it should have been an easy win, but the first half was nearly over, and they still hadn't scored. She understood. They were playing against a second division team. It was supposed to be a walk in the park. She asked for the soccer genius's analysis of the situation. He rubbed his chin, analyzing. He mentioned that finishing ability and pressure on the crosses were issues. But the biggest problem was their attack patterns were too predictable. Even the fans could see it. 9 times out of 10, they just pushed down the flank and crossed the ball. One approach, one simple plan meant it was easy for the other team to defend against. Judging by how angry the head coach was, he knew it too. The protagonist wondered if he was imagining the heat radiating from the coach's head. If he ever miraculously made his first team debut, he hoped it wouldn't be anytime soon. That man was terrifying. Gil lost patience and told the protagonist to hurry up and answer, asking if he was even listening. He responded, getting to the point. What they needed was creativity. The first half ended right there. 15 minutes into the second half, Gino made a move. The protagonist cheered. It was a direct cross, sharp and precise. The timing of the pass was perfect. In his head, he knew that was definitely going in. Just like that, every fan in the stadium went wild. 17 minutes into the second half, Lorenzo scored with a header. Watching it, the protagonist realized they had insisted on crossing. They both got goosebumps as all the fans screamed Lorenzo's name. His heart felt like it was overflowing just watching it. He imagined what it would be like if they were chanting his name. He got Gil's attention and asked how she would feel if all those people were chanting her name. She replied that it would be incredible, obviously. After all, she was the one who made him the man he was today. In fact, she thought they should be chanting her name instead of his. The protagonist fell silent, giving her a confused look. Annoyed, she asked what was up with that face, questioning his reaction. He just said he was kidding and held up his hands in surrender. Honestly, he thought, she wasn't wrong, but it was nice just to imagine. It would be incredible to hear everyone screaming his name with Gil watching. Suddenly he noticed her arm. He was struck by the sight of it covered in goosebumps. She wondered what he was staring at, bothered by his gaze. He simply explained that she had goosebumps. He said he was just noticing. Back in the game, Gino was fouled. She asked if he knew Gino. The protagonist explained that he used to train with him until recently. Gino was a year older. She was impressed, mentioning that he must be very good. In his head, the protagonist agreed. Gino was good, but it was also incredible that he had reached the first team in just a month. Of course, their roster was thin. He'd heard they were filling part of the cup roster with academy players. Even so, Gino was truly on a different level. Realizing Gino was already a pro, she concluded that made him an ultra super soccer genius. She told the protagonist to think about it. Gino was only a year older but already on the first team. Teasing, she asked if that didn't make Gino more of a genius than him. Not really enjoying the joke, he turned away, saying they couldn't assume that yet. Who knew where he would be a year from now? Gil trusted he would be down there on the field. She was impressed by his expression. She swore it was like he turned into a different person when he talked about soccer. She asked what if he didn't make it. He turned his head and told her to wait and see. In his head, he doubted why he was talking so big again. There was no way he'd reach the first team in just a year. But he had also signed a professional contract, and Gino was proof that it was possible. While he was talking, someone took a free kick. The ball hit the crossbar. He realized that this level of play didn't seem completely out of his reach. Being totally objective, maybe he could do it. On the rebound, the striker who had already scored headed it in. The fans celebrated. Leaving the stadium, Gian and Gil walked the streets. She said it had been fun. The protagonist liked her response. But to be honest, he mentioned the team played terribly. It would have been tragic if they had actually lost. He dropped her off at her door. She thanked him. He said no problem, told her to get off her phone and go to sleep early, then said goodbye, feeling a bit embarrassed. Gil watched him go, remembering quietly. She wondered why he suddenly seemed so confident. She yelled out, catching his attention. She said again that she had a lot of fun, and waved her little hand goodbye. He just stood silently, impressed and a bit embarrassed. He lowered his head, closed his eyes, and agreed that he had fun too. In his head, he wished Gil a good night. The next day at the training center, the coach asked how it went. He said he liked the game a lot. Confused, the coach asked what that meant, since the whole match was full of problems. The fans and the public were revolted thanks to all the frustrating, clueless crosses throughout the game. The coach was sure he noticed, so he told him to go ahead and be honest. The protagonist thought that his original plan was just to say it was a good matchup, and he learned a lot. He didn't want to seem arrogant. He sighed, started gesturing with his hands near his head, and decided he should just say what he really thought. When he finished speaking, he confirmed that was his opinion. Things could be done differently, but he knew talking about it was one thing. Actually going out and planning it was another. Tony understood. To summarize, he said, the protagonist thought the attack needs to be more creative. Tony noted that Gian had a good eye. That was exactly what Coach Vincenzo was thinking. Tony sighed, adding that a coach might know exactly what needs to be done. But ultimately, it's the players who play the game. Therefore, the strategy needs to adapt to the players. They needed a player who could bring something unexpected to the table if they wanted to diversify their attack patterns. But there simply wasn't a player like that on the first team right now. Tony asked if they agreed on that. The protagonist said yes. Nervous about the answer, the protagonist sensed an opportunity to try. He was surprised by it. Very excited, Tony said that the player who could bring creativity to the attack was Gian. Terrified by the proposal, Gian wondered if this was really happening or just a dream. Losing his patience, Coach Tony asks again why he isn't saying anything. Still in disbelief, Jean thought Tony was just trying to check his ego, but he's serious. Trying to calm Jean's nerves, the coach lowers his hands. He explains that he means Jean will train with the first team, not start immediately. He's just asking if he's interested. Jean calms down a bit. He puts a hand on his head and admits he's not sure how well he'd do, but he says he'd like to try. Tony crosses his arms, closes his eyes, and says, "That's great." That's all he needed to hear. He knows exactly how Jean feels. It's enough to make a grown man sweat, imagining playing out there in front of tens of thousands of people. He speaks up, pointing at Jean, reminding him he's still young. Nobody is going to criticize a young player just for trying their best. In fact, they're rooting for him. So if the opportunity arises, don't hesitate. Seize it. Hearing those beautiful words, Jean tells himself not to hesitate, to grab it. He celebrates and says, "Yes, coach." He starts walking away and thanks him. After the protagonist leaves, Tony grabs his phone and starts typing furiously. He makes a call. He tells the person on the other end that they need to talk this weekend. That person was Coach Vincenzo. Game day. Firenze versus Modena. The protagonist sighs internally, feeling a bit bad after that talk with Coach Tony. The truth is, he said he wanted to play on the first team just because of Gil. He was thinking about how Gil would feel seeing tens of thousands of people cheering for him, but she probably thinks he just loves soccer that much. He figures that's not entirely a lie either. He definitely felt the thrill of overcoming his fears while training hard with Coach Luca. Sure, Gil might have been the initial reason, but it's also true that he's fully dedicated to it now. He doesn't know why Coach Tony suddenly brought up the first team, the weekend. The Firenze team is at the Viola Park training ground. Arriving there, Tony goes to speak with Vincenzo. He tells Vincenzo he must be working too hard. His hair has completely fallen out. The two stand face to face and start chatting. Tony says Vincenzo has been getting so much attention lately that he's probably exhausted down to his bones. Vincenzo says he's basically numb to it now. Irritated, he says he lost his patience a long time ago. Tony asks what the board is saying about investing more money this winter. Vincenzo replies that they said if they lose Dusan, they'll reinvest a third of the transfer money, but you can never trust those terms. Observing the coach, Tony comments that he must be in a great mood. He heard the under-17 boys won their game. Vincenzo confirms they aren't doing too badly these days. He stands up and asks if Tony came just to brag. He admits he's jealous. Seriously though, he tells Tony he's been surviving on sheer luck. His luck is going to run out soon. The fans are tired of waiting while watching them scrape by with wins. He wonders what they expect him to do about it. They are already desperate enough for a creative player, and Dusan refuses to renew his contract. He's been keeping the team afloat by himself since last season. They're going to lose him this winter or next summer at the latest. If they can't bring in reinforcements this winter and lose their main striker, he might as well give up on the season right now. Interested in this topic, Coach Tony sits up a bit and asks if there's anyone Vincenzo is considering as a replacement. Vincenzo replies that he has a few prospects on the list. Even the tight-fisted president promised to spend some money, so he'll keep looking. Now Tony gets to the main point. He asks if Vincenzo has thought about giving a chance to what he mentioned. Joking to get out of the tense subject, Vincenzo asks if Tony means he's coming out of retirement. Disliking the joke, Tony says that's not funny. Vincenzo lowers his hand. saying he's kidding. He asks if Tony means the kid he mentioned in the phone message. Tony starts explaining that, like he said, the kid isn't just a great leader. He's a creative force who reads the game like few others can. If you need a goal, he has what it takes to do it all himself. Maybe Vincenzo is respecting the process too much, but Tony is almost certain the future of Firenze will be built around that kid. Listening to that whole story, Vincenzo asks if he really has that much confidence in this kid. He's only 16 years old. Hearing that, Tony tries to move away from the age issue. He waves his hand and says the kid needs some experience, but it won't take long. He already passed the age limit for the youth team this year. Give him one more season, and he'll be ready. Vincenzo replies that, in other words, Tony is saying they should invest in a midfielder as their second priority, instead of signing strikers in this winter window. Tony says yes. Then Vincenzo can use the saved money to completely overhaul the team next summer. New season, new start. Hearing that, Vincenzo joins his hands and lowers his head. He says he's known Tony for a long time. He knows it takes a lot of talent to get him this excited, but holding on for half a season to pin his hopes on a 16-year-old isn't an easy decision to make. Knowing it's coming from Tony, he'll think hard about it. Tony asks if he watched the videos and discs he sent. Silence prevailed. Vincenzo admits he's been very busy lately. Angry, Tony tells him he's crazy. He strongly insists that Vincenzo needs to see it. He can't believe he hasn't watched it yet. Scratching his bald head, Vincenzo stands up to take a look. It's not like he has better plans anyway. Tony gets very excited by that response. He says he'll also add the game where the kid's shown today and send it over. Looking out the window, Vincenzo says no. He wants to take a look personally this Monday. In the last game, Jean was substituted at the 45-minute mark with 1 goal and 2 assists. On the following Monday, at the recovery session, Jean arrives at the training center. Jean is confused and asks what Luca is doing out there. Luca says the two of them are going somewhere. He's going to train somewhere else. He remained confused. In his head, he knew he had no idea what awaited him. A few hours later, he is in shock with Vincenzo whispering in his ear not to get nervous. He was going to train with the first team. The coach told everyone to start warming up. The protagonist was at the Firenze first team training ground at Viola Park. The first team players said they were going to give it their all. Arriving with Coach Luca, the protagonist looked around. He thought to himself that he'd only ever seen these players in videos, and there was Sam. Luca called the protagonist over to say hello to the coach. Embarrassed, he greeted him. Hearing that, Vincenzo mentioned he'd heard a lot about him. He told him to relax and not overthink it, even though he was training with the first team. Hearing that, the protagonist thought to himself that if the coach had just said it would be a quick visit, that would have been fine. But this was a full training session with the first team. At least Coach Vincenzo seemed nice. He had looked much sterner during the game. As he walked away to put on his training gear, he noticed the coach looking very serious on the sidelines. He was shouting demands, asking how many times he needed to ask for more agility and effort. He told them to use their intelligence and get where they needed to be. He took back his previous comment. The coach was definitely intimidating. He might have just said that to make him relax, but he felt he would need to stay sharp during this practice. He was representing the U17s today, so if he wanted to avoid embarrassing Coach Tony and Coach Luca, he needed to do his best. Dressed in his training kit, he stood in front of Vincenzo. Vincenzo explained his training style to the protagonist. He said he understood. Watching the young man, Vincenzo appreciated the intention, but wondered how he could have understood it already. In the protagonist's head, he thought he had responded too slowly and should speak faster. The coach seemed like the impatient type. This wasn't exactly a simple drill. With his hand on his chin, the coach said they would give it a try. He turned around, took out Lorenzo, and said Gian was going in. The protagonist went onto the field, a bit nervous. He admitted he was definitely tense while listening. They needed to beat the defenders holding the line and try for a goal without relying on crosses. Every team they played against either blocked passes to their wingers or closed down the zones and deflected their crosses. The coach said they really didn't need other defensive game plans, since 9 times out of 10, his team tried crossing. Their attack in the final third was disorganized. And to fix it, they needed a creative player. They needed a fantasista. Tony said John was the player who would do that, but unfortunately, he was short on time. Today, he would be extremely direct with that kid. He blew the whistle to start the match. The attack attempts began. The training was intense. The protagonist looked side to side. In his head, he couldn't believe he was playing on the same team as Dusan. He was nervous, but he needed to wake up. He was only there as a visitor. He wasn't even ready for this, with the ball at his feet. It didn't matter if he hesitated a little. On the sidelines, watching the training, Vincenzo noted that he was constantly scanning the field to keep track of what was happening. It was a good habit, but if he kept moving like the other players, there wouldn't be any openings. Vlahovic was moving out of the area, and Jean was cutting through the center. The players watching wondered if the protagonist would try to break into the space Vlahovic had left. 1, 2. The protagonist's teammates intercepted the opponent. Jean's eyes widened and he tried to make a play. It was a pass, and his teammate returned it first time. Watching that, Vincenzo was surprised his player attempted a one-touch pass combo, especially with that young guy. He delivered the ball and went back inside so that Jean could return the ball to him with an outside-of-the-foot pass. A perfect pass at the defender's waist height, and the precise moment that beat the offside trap. Dusan was known for being extremely particular about his passes, but this kid met all the requirements. So he shot and scored. The recommendation might have come from Tony, but honestly, he hadn't expected much. He had just made a perfect pass with the outside of his foot. It went right through the momentary opening created by Vlavic's movement to beat the defense. That 16-year-old was much more creative than he could have imagined. Very happy with that, Luca closed his eyes and trusted optimistically, stating that the boy was just getting started. Vincenzo widened his eyes. In his head, he said that at first, he assumed both Tony and Luca were exaggerating, but as practice continued, his surprise with Jean-Li quickly stopped being about how skilled he was for a 16-year-old. Even now, when the ball was just being passed around with no clear option in sight, he ran forward to try and create an opening. He was controlling the ball, forcing the defense to move along with him, and when he saw an opportunity ahead, he passed the ball precisely. Dusan praised the pass. Dusan had been needing good passes, but it seemed he was finally in his element. The teamwork between that kid and his star player was a work of art that Ferenzi hadn't seen in a long time. Dusan scored a brilliant goal. Coach Vincenzo ran his hand over his head, saying that was it. It was as if they had been searching for something they had finally achieved, and that kid Jean nailed it. He couldn't wait until practice ended. He called Tony. Excited, he asked why he took so long to answer. He got straight to the point. He wanted to finalize things by next week. He asked him to be practical. He admitted he was right. He was going to want Jean on the starting team. After talking on the phone, he announced that practice was over. The protagonist was still a bit tense. He realized practice ended and hoped he hadn't bothered anyone there. Dusan approached him, looking serious. Observing him, the protagonist wondered if he had done something wrong. Back at the training center, listening to Vincenzo on the phone, he couldn't believe his ears. Confused and shouting, he asked if the coach seriously wanted Jean on the main team starting next week. Wasn't that a bit sudden? Cutting to the chase, Tony just answered with a flat no. Vincenzo demanded to know why. Tony explained that Jean still had a lot to learn, and he still had plenty to teach the boy, but Vincenzo refuted the explanation immediately. Tony begged for time, insisting the kid needed more development under his guidance. He explained again that it was simply too soon. Vincenzo, however, insisted it wasn't. Back to the protagonist. He stood scared and silent, staring at Dusan right in front of him. After watching that first game in person, he had looked up more videos of Ferenzi's matches that year. The main team seemed so far out of his league that he hadn't given it much thought, but his conversation with Coach Tony made him curious. There was one player involved in almost every attacking sequence. It was the same player the crowd chanted for when the game seemed stalled, Ferenzi's star, Dusan Vlahovic. Now, he was standing right there with an intimidating look on his face. Jean figured he must have done something to piss him off. Instead, Dusan clapped a hand on his shoulder. With great excitement, he said that if Jean were just 2 years older, they would have reached the Champions League ages ago. The protagonist was stunned. The Champions League? Dusan started walking away, throwing back over his shoulder that he enjoyed playing with him. He hoped to see him on the main team soon. Still in disbelief at the compliment, Jean managed to stammer that he'd try. Coach Luca walked up and asked if he knew who that was. Jean replied that of course he knew. Luca explained that Dusan had been through a lot. At first glance, he might look like a traditional target man, but in reality, his strengths were his movement and link-up play. Yet day after day, all he got were endless crosses into the box. Luca asked if Jean could imagine how frustrating that must be for him. Judging by the look on Dusan's face, though, he seemed to really enjoy Jean's passes. In fact, their teamwork had been spectacular. Keeping it humble and not wanting to brag, Jean mentioned it only happened because Dusan's movements were simply incredible. The way he moved in the box, or broke free in the blink of an eye. He dismantled the defense at the exact right moment. All Jean did was pass the ball forward when Dusan needed it. He insisted Dusan did all the hard work. Luca closed his eyes thoughtfully. He placed a hand on Jean's head and said he had learned a lot from just a single game. Either way, it wasn't every day a top-tier star like Dusan praised someone. He told Jean to be proud of himself. Feeling bashful, Jean rubbed the back of his neck. He said he was just glad he hadn't embarrassed Luca or Coach Tony. Suddenly, Vincenzo came rushing in, shouting Jean's name. Luca was confused and asked what was going on. Vincenzo immediately started examining the protagonist's body to check his fitness. When he was done, Jean asked what he was doing. Ignoring the question, Vincenzo rubbed his chin and asked how much he weighed. Jean replied that he was 139 pounds 2 months ago. Vincenzo thought for a moment. After the quick exam, he stated that Jean was basically pure muscle with almost no body fat, so he probably weighed more now. Then he wanted to know his height. Jean answered 5'6", probably. Vincenzo asked if that measurement was from 2 months ago as well. Jean confirmed it was. Suddenly, Vincenzo grabbed his hand and dragged him off, saying they were going to measure him right then and there. Seeing the fresh measurements, Vincenzo realized just how crafty Coach Tony had been. Tony had the nerve to claim the boy was 132 pounds, when in reality, he was pushing 145. Internally, Vincenzo was pleased. The kid had grown almost an inch and gained over 6 pounds in just 2 months. That meant he was definitely still having growth spurts. He could understand why Tony would be furious. Playing too many matches at that age could stunt his growth, or worse, lead to injury. Vincenzo wondered what his next move should be. Smiling, he remarked that this wasn't a transfer negotiation. He never imagined he'd be arguing with the youth coach over a kid like this. He waved his hand dismissively, said to forget it, and told Jean to come closer. Vincenzo noted the boy was in good shape. He asked if Tony and Luca had him doing any specific physical training. John replied that yes, he was training with Coach Luca. Vincenzo liked that answer. Next, he wanted to know how many meals John ate per day. 3, John replied. Scratching his beard, Vincenzo knew 3 was okay, but the boy would need some extra dietary guidance. He wanted him eating more white fish than red meat, and it had to be steamed, not fried or grilled. Jan immediately thought of the fish his dad cooked. A bit hesitantly, he told the coach he would try it that very night. Vincenzo asserted that Jan was at an age where he would grow inches simply by eating right. Hearing that, Jan thanked him for the advice. He thought he was just there for a quick visit, but Vincenzo was actually giving him solid tips. You really couldn't judge a book by its cover. Not satisfied, Vincenzo had one more piece of advice. He told Jean not to be too surprised by what the new diet did for him. He'd see the results when he came back next week. Jean was impressed, but then Vincenzo realized he must have forgotten to mention the most important part. Starting now, Jean would be alternating between the U-17 squad and the main team. Both Luca and Jean were stunned. Vincenzo explained it was designed so Jean wouldn't feel too much pressure. But, he added, Jean might very well end up playing in a real match. He told the boy to take care of himself. Turning to leave, he told them to pack up their gear. They were getting a ride home. Internally, Vincenzo was bursting with pride. John was exactly what the team needed right now. A perfect find. He wondered where Tony had unearthed such a precious gem. Keeping a serious face, Jean mentioned that perhaps he really would get to play a match for the main team. Inside, he was ecstatic. Now he could finally brag to Gil. Back in the training office, Coach Tony agreed, but laid down the law. Vincenzo had to promise to respect his terms no matter what. The conditions were strict. Only one main team match per month. All other games had to be with the U-17s. Playing time was limited to about 50 minutes per game. No aerial duels, and absolutely zero pressure regarding the athlete's performance. Tony said goodbye to Vincenzo and ended the call. Staring out the window, Tony told himself he should be happy. Why did he feel this way? It felt almost like handing over a massive responsibility to someone else. Elsewhere, Gil's phone started ringing. It was Gian. She answered, asking what on earth was going on for him to call at that hour. He said it was an emergency. Fire. She became incredibly nervous, her mind racing. A fire? And all that remained were ashes. Back at Viola Park, where the adult team trains, the protagonist held a packed lunch just like his coach ordered. He could tell Gil had put a lot of effort into it. Vincenzo was thrilled. He looked at the food, declared it perfect, and noted it had every ingredient he'd mentioned. Then he asked if his girlfriend had made it. The protagonist felt embarrassed. Vincenzo noticed his shyness right away. He asked why he was being so bashful, claiming he'd already heard everything from Coach Tony. Looking awkward, the protagonist swore she was just a friend. The coach slapped him on the back, claiming he believed him. Sure, she just made that beautiful lunch for a buddy. He stopped teasing and told him to eat up. The protagonist hadn't expected things to turn out this way. Coach Vincenzo had suggested he put on some weight, so he had tried cooking the recommended food himself. Cutting over to Gil, she burst into Jean's house screaming. Jean was standing there holding a plate. She rushed in desperately, asking if he was okay and where the fire was. She could definitely smell something burning. Embarrassed, he started laughing and showed her the burnt food. She didn't get it. Curious and loud, she demanded to know what was wrong with him since he'd mentioned a fire. Wary of her intensity, he backed up, raised his hands, and explained he'd actually said all that was left were ashes, but she had hung up before he could explain further. and hadn't answered his calls after that. She sat down, relaxing a little. She said she'd been in such a rush that she left her phone at home. She seriously thought his house was burning down. The protagonist noticed something. He looked down at her feet and realized she hadn't even put on socks. He felt terrible. Gil stared at the charred mess on the plate, wondering what it was. She asked if he'd cooked it with his soccer cleats. He admitted it was his first attempt at cooking. Gil yelled so loud she could be heard outside, asking if that was supposed to be food. She couldn't believe those ashes used to be white fish. He explained the coach wanted him to gain weight and had recommended some dishes, so he tried to make them. Bragging now, she stated that not everyone can cook. Now he had to admit how amazing she was. She patted his shoulder and ordered him to say, "Yes, Chef Gil." He told her to stop, but she kept pushing. Embarrassed, he mumbled, "Yes, Chef Gil." Gil started laughing, saying she knew she was important. He found it strange. He was never treated like this anywhere else. Gil seemed to be the only person he couldn't win against. Confused, she turned and asked why the coaches wanted him to get fat. He realized this was the perfect moment to brag. Running a hand through his hair, he announced he was moving up to play with the older guys on the first team. The coach said he was too good for his own age group now. She couldn't believe it, and ran to the fridge. He kept explaining, noting he had said he'd get there in a year, but did it in less than a month. He looked over and asked what she was doing. Judging by that pile of ashes, she replied, he wasn't allowed to cook anymore. Besides, he needed to gain weight. She slammed 2 pots on the table, declaring them perfect for lunch. Happily, she told him to leave his meals to her. He thought he should be grateful that Gil was making his food now. He felt a bit bad, but she seemed to enjoy it. He was also grateful for the coach. The man kept talking nonstop while the protagonist ate, causing him to choke. He drank some water, muttering that a guy couldn't even eat in peace. Suddenly his phone rang. He excused himself to answer it. It was Tony calling. Vincenzo watched, wondering why that coach was calling him. He leaned in to listen to the conversation. Annoyed, Vincenzo reached out to grab the cell phone. Jean handed it over, leaving Tony confused on the other end. Vincenzo told the U17 coach to stop bothering the kid and hung up on him. Walking away, Vincenzo wondered why he had interfered. He didn't like doing that. Fiddling with the phone, Vincenzo commented that the guy just didn't understand boundaries. He turned to the protagonist and told him not to worry. It was handled. The protagonist felt awkward, wondering what history those two had. Anyway, he trained with the main team on Tuesday and Wednesday, then with the U17s on Thursday. The match against Peruma was that weekend. Everyone was highly focused for this game. Peruma was ranked 4th in the group and had won their last 3 matches thanks to a strong defense. He'd only trained with the first team for 2 days, but he was curious if it would make a difference against players his own age. His role was crucial, as the opposing defense was supposed to be nearly impenetrable. Strangely, he didn't feel nervous at all. The reason might sound hard to believe, but their defense was a complete mess. The protagonist easily breezed past 2 players with a beautiful dribble. On the sidelines, the coaches were impressed by his confidence. It looked too easy for him. After facing the first team's defense, the U17s felt easy by comparison. After beating 2 more defenders with a display of skill, he finished the play. He scored 3 goals in the first half alone. It was his first hat trick since arriving in Italy. It felt weird, but soccer just seemed incredibly easy that day. After the game, Tony praised his performance and told him he was free to go, but he warned him not to be too surprised because there was news. Jean was on the substitute list for the adult team. Match day had arrived. He couldn't calm his nerves at all. It was his first time in a real match for the first team. Sure, he wasn't starting, but he wondered if he even belonged there. He couldn't even hear what the coach was saying about the game plan. The coach said he would learn a lot just by soaking up the atmosphere from the bench, so he shouldn't worry too much. But he still couldn't help being nervous. As soon as those doors opened and they walked out to play, he would see the stands packed with screaming fans. If by some chance he got subbed in, he doubted he'd be able to play well. Then again, he lost track of what he was saying. There was probably 0 chance he'd actually get on the field. Someone tapped his shoulder. He asked what he was mumbling to himself. It was the first team captain, Cristiano. He walked off after motivating the kid. Hearing that, the protagonist felt a little embarrassed. He said the captain was right. He needed to pull himself together and stop letting anxiety win. He needed to cool his head. Italian Serie A Championship. The match was Firenze versus Genoa. Up in the stands, the protagonist's dad and Gil were watching. Right in the middle of it all, they both noticed how intense all the fans were. He still couldn't believe he was there to see Jean in such an important game. His father was so proud, thinking to himself, he couldn't believe it either. Jean didn't usually say much, so he never imagined his son would actually invite him to watch one of his games. He had a full work schedule that weekend, but his son came first. Crying with emotion, he declared he would probably remember this day for the rest of his life. It was very special. Gil turned to him and asked if he thought Jean would play today. He said he wasn't sure. He thought it was incredible they had put a 16-year-old kid on the team. He was having trouble imagining him actually stepping onto the field. Excited, she claimed she had a feeling he would still play today. After all, he was the soccer genius. Back to the protagonist. He was on the bench, very nervous. In his head, he told himself he was just sitting there watching, yet he felt like his heart was going to jump out of his chest. But now that he could focus on the game, he felt less nervous than when he was back in the locker room. Since the opposing team was in last place in the league, his team was definitely in control of the match. Even so, the coach was very upset because they hadn't scored a goal yet. The coach always emphasized that they needed to score quickly in those situations because control rarely defined the game. Goals did, but it wasn't going to be easy. The other team knew how simple their attack patterns were. They had them completely blocked. 15 minutes of the game had already passed, and they hadn't scored. Vincenzo was very irritated and started shouting various words. Noticing something, the protagonist looked back and saw all the fans were also very angry. He said the fans were already tired of it after 15 minutes. They were expressing their dissatisfaction. Vincenzo was really very serious. He realized the fans were already sick of their plays, and the atmosphere in the stadium was turning negative. In his thoughts, Jean realized they needed a goal. Unexpectedly, Dusan headed the ball, scoring a beautiful goal. Everyone celebrated with great joy. Jean didn't jump around, but he was very happy. That should please the fans a little. The fans didn't like it. They wondered why that one went in. And since the ball went in, the team would just keep crossing it instead of making plays on the ground. They wanted the team to lose, so the coach would get fired. Seeing that, the protagonist got scared and said the coach was going to hear them. He realized then, if scoring a goal wasn't enough to please the fans, he wondered what would be. He watched the coach. He saw that he had heard everything and got scared, but instead of getting irritated, the coach gave a slight smile. 55 minutes of the game had passed. It was 1-0 for the protagonist's team. Another Firenze player sent in another cross. It was deflected by a defender, but that was another chance. Dusan was right there in the middle. He managed to get his foot on the ball, taking a beautiful shot that went into the goal. The match was now 2-0. The fans claimed it was luck, criticizing the player. Gil was indignant because they were winning. She wondered why the fans were still mad. The protagonist's father wasn't sure, but if he had to guess, winning was certainly important when watching soccer. Even someone as uninformed as him could tell that match wasn't exciting. Gil smiled and embarrassedly admitted she felt the same way. It would be much more fun if they let Jean play. His father got serious. He said yes, but as he said before, he doubted they would let him in. Suddenly, he noticed something down on the field. Gil also put her hand over her mouth and pointed. Jean was going to enter the field. His father, in his head, was stunned. He couldn't believe it was happening. His 16-year-old son was going to play professionally. He was very serious. His coach grabbed him and gave him instructions, saying he had nothing to worry about. He just needed to focus on one thing. He told him to do whatever he wanted out there on the field. Very confident, he affirmed that he would. The coach was still talking to him. He explained that getting the ball stolen, missing a pass, or blowing a shot were all fine. He wouldn't say a word about those things, but he'd be furious if he played passively. Then he sent him onto the field. With a proud look, Vincenzo told him not to copy the seniors' playing style. Just play your own game. All right. I still can't believe this is actually happening, but this is it. The moment I step onto a professional field for the very first time. No time to soak it in, though. As I enter, our formation shifts from a 4-3-3 to a 4-2-3-1. My spot is in the center of the three, right behind Dusan. It's where I've always played, the shadow striker role. The opposing team is down by 2 goals, yet they haven't changed their defensive strategy. It doesn't matter. While I watched from the bench, I replayed a specific scenario in my mind over and over. They aren't even pressing up to the midfield line. The key is how to move forward from there. The starters are already exhausted, so as a substitute, I'm receiving more passes. Considering everything, I guess the veterans aren't upset that I'm holding on to the ball so much. The other team is leaving the flank open. They're allowing crosses, but not shots. Too bad for them. I have absolutely no intention of going that way. I make a sharp move. The defenders hesitate, unsure if I'm driving through the center, and that's exactly where I'm going. Maybe not in the past, but today, I feel different. The reason is that I've trained with the first team. Compared to them, these guys are way too easy to get past. I execute a clean dribble, leaving another player on the ground. That's one down, but I still have an army to break through. There are too many markers. Fortunately, I'm not alone. Dusan raises his hand, calling for a pass. It must be thanks to all the practice. My body is moving without me having to think. I managed to deliver a pinpoint pass to Dusan. He's happy to receive it. Great pass. The moment I pass the ball to Dusan and start running, The scenario I imagined dozens of times begins to overlap with reality. Moving without the ball, I indicate I'm going left. I make a quick cut. The passes. Whenever we move, they come right to me, like someone drew the lines with a ruler. Strangely, just as I'm about to receive the pass, Dusan is already positioned in front of me. Does he have a clone or something? Now, only the final defensive line remains. I'll pass to Dusan one more time and keep moving. There's a chance he might just shoot. I watch the reflection in his eyes, but he could also pass the ball one more time, just like in training, to completely dismantle their defense. Then, he passes the ball again. Good thing I was ready. My precisely timed run barely beat the offside trap, and Dusan's selfless play broke the last line of defense. I managed to control the ball. The moment I got it, my breathing tense. Everything in front of me disappeared, except the ball itself. Instead of the tens of thousands of people out there, all I could think about was my dad and Gil watching me. I couldn't wait to show them exactly what I could do. I take the shot. The ball spins with wicked effect. Tense. Gil clasps her hands together, eyes wide. Everyone on the team wants to see this go in. The ball enters the net. The goalie didn't stand a chance. I celebrate wildly. Even when I could finally breathe again, I still couldn't believe any of it was actually happening. What just happened? The crowd, the grass beneath my feet, the air in the stadium, I can feel it all, but it's also surreal. This must be a dream. How long have I been dreaming? Since I signed that pro contract? Or when I joined the first team? Maybe the dream started when we beat Juventus. Or maybe Dusan interrupted my thoughts, grabbing me. He put his hand on my head. You really did it now. I was impressed by Dusan's comment. I couldn't believe he was saying that. I actually scored a goal. In my first team debut, no less. The captain said I was just pretending to be nervous in the locker room. Everyone started praising me. Seeing one player joking around with me too much, the captain told him to calm down. Don't overdo it on his first game. I bumped into Gian. Jean asked if I was okay. I said I was fine. The captain steered me around and told me to take a look. Suddenly, I'm facing a purple sea of fans. Everyone is shouting and chanting. This is intense. I wonder where Dad and Gil are sitting. I always wanted to show them how far their support has taken me, and I finally managed to do it. I couldn't be happier. I raise my hand with great confidence. Then I get nervous. They got even louder. The fans screamed. Dusan approaches me. Better prepare yourself for what's coming. What were you thinking, scoring a goal like that on your debut? Never mind. You'll understand soon enough. Annoyed, I tell him to speak up now. Embarrassed, I ask if my celebration was too arrogant. In my head, we had won the game, but I had completely missed an important detail. My dad and Gil weren't the only people watching me play today. Back in the locker room, I zip up my bag. The game is over, but I'm still shaking. I can't wait to enjoy a good meal with Gil and Dad, then go home and sleep. The captain approaches me. What were you thinking out there? Dusan jumps into the conversation. If I were him, I would have already run out the back door. Cristiano closes his eyes, touches my shoulder. Scoring a goal like that on your debut play, that's going to cost you. I was spooked. Ever since I scored that goal, all the other players have been saying the same thing. Is there some unwritten rule that junior players shouldn't score goals or something? Are the veterans going to haze me when we get back? The captain gets my attention. Watch closely. This is the price you have to pay. As he opens the door to leave, tons of fans are calling my name. They're incredibly happy because I scored that ridiculous goal. I might save the team. The emotion was overwhelming. Seeing that crowd of people, I went into shock. My eyes widened. Watching it all, the captain is very happy. Told you to prepare yourself. Jean wants to get out of there. He says he's not ready for all this yet, but Cristiano grabs his clothes. Where do you think you're going? You need to take responsibility for your actions. Nervous? I ask how I'm supposed to do that. He explains I have two options. First, ignore them completely because I'm tired and just want to get on the bus. Or second, show gratitude by taking photos with them and signing autographs. The choice is entirely yours. I stood there confused. Is he seriously talking about this right now?